Every adventurer in Greystone Town knew me as that pretty boy scribe, the coward who copied commission notices behind a counter and never took a fight. My name is Lance, and the reputation was the whole point. Then a panel loaded 2 mythical talents onto my vision: endless stamina and 1 perfect resurrection a day. On a pebble shoal, I died with spears through my chest and stood back up in a cloud of steam. The coward they laughed at could not be killed. Tap that like, hit subscribe, and stick around. Both keep these uploads alive. The story behind this is messier than the hook lets on. Let me roll it back to day 1. The panel tells me my Castro swordsmanship proficiency has ticked up another point, carrying me from level 2 into level 3, and that strength and agility have each gone up by 1. I let out a breath and set the sweat-soaked wooden training sword back on the rack. My chest heaves for a few seconds, and then the stamina I just emptied out swinging that sword refills itself completely. In the space of 3 or 4 breaths, it is finally time to register as an adventurer. A thought is all it takes. A pale blue translucent panel unfolds in front of my eyes, and the swordsmanship entry expands on its own. Castro swordsmanship, level 3, proficient. It is the standard sword form of the 3rd Legion of the Iris Kingdom, nicknamed mud sword fighting by the men who actually had to use it. It comes out of the 4th drill manual of the Border Army, built for one specific job: killing orcs in leather armor down in muddy trenches. Underneath that unglamorous entry hang 2 thin auxiliary skills: common tongue, reading and writing at level 3, and arithmetic at level 4. I curl my lip at that pathetic little skill tree. There is nothing to be done about it. These are livelihood skills, the ones I ground out over the past few months while barely keeping myself alive inside the Adventurers Guild. Months ago, I transmigrated into this world and confirmed with my own eyes that it genuinely contained fire-breathing dragons, pointy-eared elves, and orcs with a taste for violence. Then I sat down and wrote myself 3 unbreakable rules. Never join a crowd because it looks lively. Never involve myself in another person's business. Never go outside after dark. That was not cowardice talking. That was a lesson paid for in blood, and the blood belonged to the body I am currently wearing. This border town is called Greystone Town. It sits close to the resource-rich Copper Creek Forest, with a small dungeon labyrinth not far beyond that, which makes it a paradise for adventurers. The streets run wide, lined on both sides with shops, and on any given day you can watch warriors in heavy plate and spellcasters hauling absurdly oversized staves pushing through the traffic. Caravan wagons roll in without pause, and the air carries ale and the bright clink of gold changing hands. All that commerce keeps an enormous number of people fed. The original owner of this body made his living ghostwriting family letters for illiterate adventurers. Men who lick blood off a blade edge always have something they want said to family back home, or to a sweetheart waiting somewhere. His father had been a retired veteran, dead by then, and that connection let him route letters through the Veterans Guild at a good discount, so he pocketed the difference. Then, on a black and windy night, he stayed out later than he should have, because he wanted 1 extra rush fee. A thief drifting through town from somewhere unknown put a single slash through him and ended it there. That is how the current version of me came to exist. Tragic when you lay it out like that. In my last life, I was a 9-to-5 corporate drone whose side hustle was writing reviews of improper games. That day, I was typing furiously at my screen, drafting a review of something newly released, when the computer case decided to leak current into me. My vision went black and I woke up here. What still makes my toes curl in the sheets is that I never got the chance to close that game page on the monitor. Months into this world, whenever I imagine what my family saw on that screen sitting beside my corpse, I want to find a crack in the ground and climb into it. Since I am here, I may as well make the best of it. I took the lesson the original body paid for and threw out the ghostwriting job, because it meant walking strange streets and alleys at strange hours. I dug a small bag of silver coins out of a gap in the floorboards, money the thief never found. Then I canceled the rental on the old place and moved somewhere safer, closer to the busy district. Then I shamelessly tracked down several of my old man's former comrades, and after enough networking and enough palm greasing, I secured myself an iron rice bowl as a scribe in the Adventurers Guild. The work is dull. The work is also safe, and safe is the entire point. I sit behind a thick counter, copying out newly posted commission notices and recording registration changes for adventurer parties. I do not even have to face the front desk crowd, those loud men with mouths full of filthy jokes. Dull, yes, but the salary is steady, and steady means 50 copper coins a day. For context, at the Wild Boar and Rose Tavern next door to the guild, a hearty dinner of thick roast meat with a big foaming glass of ale runs 8 copper. Any industry that so much as touches the word adventure is obscenely profitable. Being a scribe means the newest mission intelligence and the freshest gossip cross my desk before they reach anyone else. That makes my seat a sensitive one, and plenty of ill-intentioned information brokers have tried to pry my mouth open. My governing principle is that staying alive beats everything, so my mouth stays stitched shut and my behavior stays so quiet I am functionally invisible. The strange result is that everyone likes me for it. Colleagues and adventurers alike praise the steady, reliable young man behind the counter. Days pass like plain water. Every day I listen to the adventurers on the far side of my counter brag. Today one party pulled mithril ore off the 3rd floor of the dungeon, got rich overnight, and moved the whole team to the Bay City to buy a new base. Tomorrow, some lucky idiot rescued a stray elven ranger mid-exploration and walked away with both a reward and a romance. None of it stirs anything in me, and honestly I want to laugh a little. I do not envy gamblers who trade their lives for coin. My goal is clear and humble: survive a few more years, save 10 gold coins, board the biggest caravan leaving Greystone Town, and ride it to Ostera, the wealthiest trading capital on the entire East Coast. I have heard about the high-end lounges there. Fox-person waitresses with fluffy ears. Forest elves whose beauty is famous across the continent. Succubus older sisters with heart-shaped tails and gazes that linger a beat too long. Siren songstresses with long azure hair whose singing is supposed to smooth out your soul. And if a man is truly lucky, one of those haughty, hot-blooded dragonborn maidens. My wish is a small one. Find an alien race girl of the kind that only existed in fantasy in my last life, run some quiet little business, and spend the rest of this lifetime in peace. Fate, of course, had a joke queued up. Maybe the golden finger needed time to load itself into this world's rules. On the exact day I hit the 1-month mark since transmigrating, that attribute panel, the one so familiar it makes me want to break down, snapped onto my retina with a crackle of current. It is the game, the one that electrocuted me into this world in the first place. Name: Lance. Class none. Strength 4, Agility 5, Constitution 4, Spirit 7, Perception 6. Completely mediocre numbers, an exact match for an ordinary clerk. Only the blood-red entry at the very bottom stands out, and it stands out badly. Talent: Hoover Gelmir Surge, marked red. The description says Hoover Gelmir is the world's spring in Niflheim from Norse mythology. The effect is that my stamina will behave like that spring, endless and surging without pause, restored rapidly through nothing more than simple breathing. There is an additional line. Because my constitution has been altered, my sensitivity to pain and to abnormal statuses will be significantly reduced. My mouth twitches reading it. That word had better mean what a proper person means by it. What kind of legitimate talent is this? This is plainly built so a certain kind of protagonist can go rampaging through a certain kind of game. A mutated constitution. The name Lance in the dictionary of the common tongue means a spear driven straight and sharp. That was my dead old man's greatest gift to me, the hope that I would act like a spear and punch a future out of this miserable world. Staring at the talent panel in front of me, I fall into serious doubt about the divine plan here. Perhaps God never intended me to be a hero at all, and would prefer I grow into some legendary tormentor of women. Talents are not unique to me, to be clear. On top of the talents granted by professions and the ones carried in special bloodlines, there's a third and far scarcer category: the person awakens, at most one of those in an entire lifetime. They are graded strictly into 5 tiers: common, excellent, transcendent, legendary, and mythical. Looking at that dazzling red on my panel, I am certain it stands for mythical. I feel a little ashamed about where this thing originated, but I have to admit it is powerful to the point of breaking the rules outright. Overpowered does not cover it. Fully restoring stamina just by breathing means that as long as my mind holds together, I can train without end and sharpen skills at a pace no mortal reaches. Veteran adventurers are constantly forced into hasty retreats from the dungeon simply because they ran out of fuel. I would only ever need to consider 2 questions: whether my health bar is long enough and whether my inventory is big enough. I would be a perpetual motion machine that never tires. Maybe I think I could actually give this a try. Reality turns around and slaps that ambition out of my mouth. The bad news reaches the Adventurers Guild the following afternoon. A magic riot broke out in the dungeon outside the city with no warning at all, and hundreds of adventurers exploring inside died where they stood. The disaster does not just take those lives, it goes straight through the economic artery of Greystone Town, because adventurers are a high-spending population, and their sudden absence drops the town's entire service industry into a bitter winter. The most immediate consequence for me personally is that my daily food costs go up by 2 copper coins. The worst consequence is that my workload explodes. As a scribe, I have to work overtime processing hundreds of casualty notices. Alongside the mechanical copying, I receive stacks of letters sent from distant places, whose owners will never open them with their own hands again. Sorting through the effects, I find a name I recognize. A young adventurer I once wrote for, back when I still did the letter business. With nobody watching, I quietly open the unclaimed reply. The paper is rough and the handwriting crawls unevenly across it. Inside is an old farmer's pride in his son who became an adventurer, and a long ramble about how everything at home is fine, He mentions that the boy's younger brother keeps leaning against the window asking when his older brother is coming back. The little one wants to hear whether Greystone Town truly has airships with those huge gas bags and propellers, and whether they really fly above the clouds. At the end comes the mother's clumsy scolding. The family has not spent a single silver coin he sent home over all these years, and has saved every one of them. If he is tired out there, he should just come home, because the savings are enough for him to marry a pretty wife. My vision blurs somewhere in the middle. I cannot read the rest. That newly lit adventure dream of mine goes out completely, right there. Killed by a letter from a farmhouse. The only lasting change that Red Talent produces is a revision to my retirement plan. Where I once pictured a fox-eared girl, or a delicate elf, high-demand succubi and sturdy, impressively durable dragonborn maidens are now inside the selection range. That is the whole of it. Greystone Town keeps flowing along in its grief. The rioting dungeon eventually settles. The town slowly claws back its old prosperity, and new adventurers pour in to fill the gap until it seems nobody remembers the dead at all. One person is the exception. I pull out a good half of the salary I saved that month and push it into that man's casualty notice envelope. Adventurers who never made professional get no pension of any kind, so this meager thing is all I have to offer a family I will never meet. Then I take my left hand and slap my right hand hard for it. Useless sympathy, I tell myself. That money scattering like that pushes my austere plan back yet again. For the next 3 months, life goes quiet. On the strength of a harmless and reasonably handsome face, I work my way into the inner circle of Nia, the guild's receptionist. Mia has soft brown hair worn long and a tall figure, and everyone in the guild agrees she is a beauty. Through her I meet 2 more girls with completely different temperaments. One is Amber, the poster girl at the tavern, with dazzling golden red short hair, a chest that makes it difficult for anyone to look anywhere else, and a fiery, blunt way of speaking. The other is Flora from the town apothecary, a quiet, braided girl whose voice never rises above soft. The 4 of us fall into the habit of gathering on free evenings to play a card game called 3 Dragon Cards, which runs on rules close enough to the poker of my past life. Trying to earn back the money I gave away, I go savage on my own food budget and live off the hardest, cheapest black bread I can find. Flora notices. She starts slipping me croissants with honey folded into them. She blushes while explaining that she tried her hand at baking and burned the batch. So really she is just handing off something that has to be disposed of anyway. At the tavern, Amber quietly adds a large cup of warm milk to my cheap set meal. Then she teases me in front of the entire room about how little boys have to drink their milk if they want to grow up strong. When the adventurers roar at that, Amber picks up an enormous wooden mug, slams it down on the table, and shouts the rough men back into their seats like a hen defending her chicks. Over time, I earn myself a small reputation in Greystone Town, and a nickname that is equal parts funny and depressing. That pretty boy scribe. I do not care in the slightest. Every day I count my accumulating copper, occasionally round up a few young ladies for cards, and freeload good food off all 3 of them. Nia keeps finding me private gigs writing family letters for extra income. Watching my savings climb, I feel each coin bringing that dream a step closer. Aradia, however, is the goddess of this world who governs talent, courage, and adventure, and she clearly has no intention of letting me off easy. Another month goes by. Deep in the middle of one night, that panel spasms back to life without warning, short-circuiting like a bad electrical contact. Personal talents are supposed to be singular, one to a person, for life. Except my soul is a transmigrator's soul, and apparently that counts for something, because after 4 long months of gestation, a second line of bright red text surfaces on the panel. Talent, Ring of Ouroboros. Red. The description tells me Ouroboros is the great serpent of legend that bites its own tail, symbolizing the eternal cycle and immortality. The effect is one perfect resurrection every single day. No matter how thoroughly my physical body is destroyed, no matter if it goes missing entirely, I will reshape it after death and come back whole. There is an additional line, of course. On resurrection, all negative statuses on my body are automatically purged, and every ability currently on cooldown is reset. Lying flat on my bed, I open my eyes wide and stare at that glowing panel while a torrent of curses runs through my skull. That damned game is still chasing me. Endless stamina, paired with the ability to revive at full health on the spot even while tangled up in a multi-woman battlefield. Put those 2 together and you have the base template for a protagonist, and exactly the sort of game I used to review. And I can feel that the short-circuit sensation in the panel is fully gone now, which means the system has stabilized. My cheat is finally completely loaded. Looking at that luxurious configuration, my face shows no particular joy. What it shows is hesitation. This talent is a devil with an excellent figure, leaning in close and coaxing me toward a world I have deliberately kept myself out of. I sigh, get up, pull paper and pen out of the drawer, and start doing math. On the original plan, as a senior scribe I make 50 copper a day. and after subtracting the carefully calculated 8 copper of daily living expenses, I net 42. Add the private gigs Naya routes my way, 5 family letters a week at 5 copper each. At that rate, I need to grind out another 6 years to accumulate the enormous sum of 10 gold coins and buy my way to Ostera. I would be 24 by then, in the most commercially vibrant city on the continent, with a mind carrying a few centuries of advantage. I would find my footing fast and then marry some gentle alien race young lady. But that is just how ordinary people live. What if I changed classes and became an adventurer instead? Even as the lowest tier of adventurer, I would only need to kill 8 goblins a day. Market rate for a goblin ear is 20 copper, and if I take a clearing quest and turn in 10 at once, the guild throws in an extra silver coin on top. Subtract food, daily weapon maintenance, and logistics, and I clear roughly 40 copper. A little over 2 years and the 10 gold coins are mine. And that is the efficiency of an ordinary adventurer. My eyes drift back to the red line reading Virgilmir's Surge. An ordinary man is wrung out after 8 of them. So what does that make me? 30 a day. Or 50. As long as my mental state holds, 100 would not be a difficult number. I shake my head hard, trying to fling that lunatic thought back out of my skull. A man should not be greedy. Even playing it safe at 18 a day, 1 year finishes the first small goal of my life. And I would not have even turned 19 yet. 5 full years of my youth sit in that gap, and I find I cannot refuse them. System, I groan into my hands. This is entirely your fault. The hardest thing in this life is breaking out of your own comfort zone. I complain out loud. My execution, on the other hand, is not vague at all. Early the next morning, I put in a leave request with my direct superior, Grayson. The Adventurers Guild is a massive institution, and the document recording group I belong to sits under the administrative department, so I am hardly its only scribe. Grayson comes out of a military background too, and he thinks well of my late father. Scribes are entitled to vacation days in the first place, a fact this particular workaholic has never once made use of. He signs it off without a single question. Having chosen this road, I have to walk it by the rules, and registering as an adventurer has a hard threshold. You must hold a combat skill that has reached proficient, which means I have to look toward the Veterans Guild. Money makes the mare go, as the saying goes. After spending a little of it, I dig a drunken retired veteran out of a corner of the guild. This unremarkable middle-aged man turns out to be an elite who survived the famous Bloody Iris campaign, and his Castro swordsmanship sits at master level. The Veterans Guild really is crouching with hidden tigers, and any old man dozing in the sun against a wall might be a retired professional. For my dead father's sake, he gives me a bone fracture discount and charges only 30 silver coins. My money pouch, which had painstakingly accumulated 45 silver over 3 months, shrivels on the spot, and my heart twitches watching it happen. Instructor solved. I still need a venue. Through one of Naya's connections, I quietly find the young lady from the logistics department and secure use of the guild's internal private training room. The restrictions are not light. 3 hours a day, only after sundown, at a wear and tear fee of 10 copper an hour. That is already the internal cost price. Praise Nia. I draw a small cross in my heart for her. The guild does have a free open training ground, and I do not dare set foot in it. Anyone versed in the secrets of survival understands that the tree standing tallest in the forest is the one the wind destroys. If a crowd watched me swing a sword for several straight hours, without so much as panting, by tomorrow some magic-class professional young lady would be dragging me down to a basement for research. There is no need to stand out like that. So for the next half month, I open up a hellish special training mode. Every day, the instant work ends, I dive straight into that sealed private room. An ordinary person running swordsmanship drills at that intensity is finished inside an hour. And in real combat, the stamina drain gets measured in minutes. I am simply not built like that anymore. Every time my stamina bottoms out, I stop, take a few deep breaths, and feel the strength come back in like a tide. What surprises me more is that the reduced sensitivity to abnormal statuses in the talent description also applies to mental fatigue. My mind holds up as well as my body does, which means nothing slows the loop down at all. The logistics department spends those weeks thoroughly confused about why the consumption of wooden swords and training dummies in that one room has suddenly spiked. A rumor starts going around that some professional is secretly training in there late at night. Equipment wear is not the only new expense. My appetite goes somewhere frightening. Fortunately, Amber's Tavern sits right beside the guild, so every night after training I drag my starving body over to report in. My eating, which resembles a starving ghost given one last meal, does not scare Amber off in the slightest, though what it does to my wallet is another matter. Amber, being kind-hearted, always brings out a plate of meat piled like a small mountain. She mentions offhand that it is left over from the evening service, and has to be thrown out anyway. It was originally headed for the stray dogs in the back alley, but since I happen to be sitting right there, praise Amber, I express my gratitude indistinctly through a mouthful of roast meat. On the 5th day of this borderline cheating, The panel throws up a prompt: Castro swordsmanship proficiency, level 1 to level 2, and stamina up by 1. Late on the 16th night, the swordsmanship threshold that takes other people a full year gets crossed in half a month, and the panel flickers again. Name: Lance. Class: None. Strength 5, Agility 6, Constitution 5, Spirit 7, Perception 6. Talents: Hoovergelmir's Surge in red, and Ring of Ouroboros in red. Skills: Castro swordsmanship at level 3 and proficient, arithmetic at level 4 and mastered. This stretch of insane training can finally end. Tomorrow, when I go into work, is the day I officially register. Unfortunately, the next day I step through the doors of the Adventurers Guild and do not get so much as a syllable out of the sentence I rehearsed all night. Mia grabs me with panic all over her face and hauls me behind the counter, begging me to save her, because she will never finish copying out the task list on her own. So on the day I had planned to take off, I get press-ganged into overtime more frantic than anything I have done before. Somewhere in a morning busy enough to nearly snap my quill in half, I work out why the guild is packed. It is the doing of the overly clever branch president of Greystone Town. That shrewd old man watched revenue fall through the floor month after month, and then noticed that the earlier dungeon riot had scrambled the magic distribution all around the region. Low-level monsters living in the middle of Copper Creek Forest have been migrating outward as though something spooked them, which has set off constant harassment incidents in the nearby villages. Slimes clogging up farmland irrigation ditches, packs of goblins robbing travelers on the road, villagers reporting gnolls in groups at the forest edge. The president used all of that as grounds to petition the nearest superior city guild for a special allowance decree. Any task registered or completed in Greystone Town now pays out 20% higher across the board, with the entire increase subsidized from above. Low-level adventurers in every surrounding town have come swarming in behind the caravans like sharks tasting blood in the water. Nia and I spend the whole morning buried in registrations and transcriptions. When the wall clock strikes 12, Nia lets out a long breath and stretches hard enough to arch her back. Midday sun comes through the stained glass on the side of the hall and lands on her long brown hair, laying a gold halo over it. Today she has on a forest green velvet headband with a few delicate roses folded out of white lace pinned to it. As her arms go up, that dark green guild standard double-breasted vest pulls tight and outlines a shape that is genuinely difficult to look away from, and I am briefly not thinking about anything at all. Pinched in her raised hand is the last finished registration list. She leans all the way back, crosses her legs, hooks the cabinet in front of her with one toe, and slides the list neatly onto my little table. "Mr. Scribe," she says, "if I have looked my fill, perhaps I could file that." She blinks at me, mouth curling, and announces she is going to go eat a delicious lunch. Then she pushes her luck and blows a flippant kiss in my direction. And exactly as she starts to withdraw her hand, I catch her wrist. Nia jolts, 2 clouds of red racing across her fair little face, and before she can react at all, I have pressed a quill and a fresh sheet of parchment into her fingers. I look up at her and tell her I need a favor. I want to register as an adventurer too. She goes still. Then she puffs up her cheeks and mutters that here she had thought I was finally about to invite her to lunch. A half-second later, the words land properly, and everything about her stalls. The blush drains away, replaced entirely by astonishment. She asks me to repeat what I just said, eyes wide and full of doubt, and looks me up and down like she is reappraising a piece of furniture. Then she points out that I have only been training for half a month. By her standards as a senior receptionist, that is not possible. The fastest anyone ordinary passes the assessment and becomes a formal adventurer is half a year, and that is inside a place like the Guild, with a complete training system attached. She has never heard of a crash course finishing in 15 days. The chosen heroes in Bard novels do not count, obviously, since every protagonist in those things is a monster. I anticipated this question all night, so I keep my face flat and bring out the foolproof shield. I remind her that my old man was a retired veteran. Then, with a good helping of mystery, I explain that I have been under his devil training since childhood. The foundation was laid a long time ago, and all I was missing was this final push. And then I turn a very sincere look on her and add that this is largely thanks to her. Renting me that private training room let me break through the bottleneck and drag my swordsmanship up to proficient. Under that gaze, her heartbeat visibly stumbles, and she looks away in a hurry, unable to meet my eyes. She asks, in a voice barely louder than a mosquito, whether she is really that important, fingers twisting at her own sleeve. A few seconds later, she lifts her head again, working hard to reassemble her professional competence, though the roots of her ears are still burning. "Fine," she says. She will process the registration. Then she waves the quill at me and warns, with a little too much sweetness in it, that the test still cannot be skipped, because we may be our own people, but rules are rules. The 2 hours at noon are the Adventurers Guild's untouchable rest period. The noise in the hall drains away, and most of the counterstaff either go foraging in a group or find somewhere to nap. Nia uses the gap to lead me into the supply team's warehouse, where the only sound is our own footsteps. She mutters that it should be right under here somewhere and crouches down in front of a row of old display cabinets. Today she is wearing a dark brown knee-length skirt and a pair of tight leather boots. Reaching whatever is buried in the back of that cabinet requires her to kneel and push most of her upper body inside. The resulting posture is frankly not decent. The tight fabric traces a curve at her waist and hip that trembles slightly with every movement. My throat goes dry. I turn my eyes to the ceiling and start counting the individual threads in a cobweb up there. Then Nia announces that she found it, backs out of the cabinet, and holds up something buried under a layer of dust. It is a brass lantern base, clearly ancient, the workmanship rough and primitive, with a dull translucent ore set into the center of it. Put a glass cover over that thing and it would look like any lantern in any house in town. Naya drops the gadget on a cluttered table and rubs at her dust-smeared face, which instantly turns her careful makeup into a grubby little smudge, like a kitten that lost a fight with a chimney. I lean in and ask what it is. Newcomers who want to register at the Adventurers Guild normally have a few fixed testing routes. The most common is to be vouched for and recommended by a high-level adventurer, and the other is to find a qualified instructor, sit an assessment, and walk out with a certificate. I do not know a single high-level adventurer, so it was always going to be the second one. What I had told Naya was that my requirements were low-key, and one more time, low-key. What I meant was that she should introduce me to an instructor with a sealed mouth and a trustworthy reputation. There is a reason for that. I have heard about enough dirty arrangements where a newcomer gets lucky in the dungeon and comes out carrying rare materials. The very instructor who tested him sells that information, and the newcomer ends up murdered for his haul. For a low-level adventurer, finding somebody trustworthy is not a preference. It is survival. Plenty of guild receptionists keep their own channels for exactly this, and Nia is no exception. What I never expected was that she would dig up an antique instead. She pats the dust off her hands and tells me casually that this is the Embers of Iridia. That name stops me. I have absolutely heard it before, but not as the name of an object. It is a household fairy tale in this world. The story goes that a long time ago, the world dropped into an endless darkness, and terrified people hid shivering in cold caves like animals, until one young man stood up. He shouldered a pack and told everyone whose eyes had gone dull that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. As long as he kept walking west toward the lost sun, he would bring hope back. He walked into that boundless wasteland and lost his way in the dark almost immediately. That is when the goddess Iridia came down. She handed him a lantern that gave off no light at all and told him to take it, because it could guide him through the darkness to find tomorrow. The young man gripped it and stared at the dead wick, confused, and said it had no light, so he still could not see the road ahead. Iridia only smiled and told him that this flame does not burn wood, it burns courage. It is not that you see the light and therefore have a direction. It is that when you take a step, the light appears. He half understood her. He gathered his courage and took the first step into the unknown dark anyway. The stone in the lantern lit with a faint red glow that illuminated one small patch of ground directly beneath his feet. As his stride grew steadier, the light grew stronger. When he finally stopped hesitating and ran outright through the dark, the embers in his hand turned into a blaze that tore the long night open. That was the first dawn this world ever had, and that young man was its first brave hero. The story ends with a line for children, that they should not fear being unable to see the future clearly, because as long as they dare to walk forward, the light is in their hands. Standing there staring at a dusty base on a workshop table, I ask whether the fairy tale is actually true. Nia gives me a strange look and empties a bucket of cold water over my head. She asks what I am imagining, then informs me the fairy tale is of course fake. This is a standard item the headquarters distributes uniformly whenever an Adventurers Guild branch opens anywhere, and it exists specifically to test whether a newcomer qualifies to register. Its function is simple, she explains, since it senses the user's strength, and any combat skill at proficiency level is enough to trigger the faintest red light out of it. Sensing strength. What sort of magical dark technology is this? She points at the base and says that, just as the fairy tale claims, when you have made up your mind, that light stands for having the courage to take the first step. I open my mouth to ask why the guild still puts time and money into manual testing when it has something this convenient and this objective sitting in a warehouse. I get half the question out before the answer arrives like lightning behind my eyes. The instructors. Nia shrugs and says it looks like I already worked it out. From the very founding of the Adventurers Guild, there were veteran adventurers who had rendered real service but were forced into retirement by wounds and illness. To look after them, the guild built an instructor certification system and handed them responsibility for assessing and recommending newcomers, which guaranteed those men a living in their later years. That hardened into a fixed chain of interests a long time ago. So the Embers of Iridia still get issued according to custom, and they still go straight into a warehouse to gather dust. Then she blinks at me and says that when she heard my request, She remembered this thing could bypass every single person involved, which suits my quirk about never making a fuss perfectly. She pushes the base across the table and tells me to try it. Then she plants her hands on the table edge, rests her chin on the backs of them, and stares at that stone like a kitten watching a hole. I take a breath, put my right hand out, and lay my palm gently over the translucent ore. It is not cold the way stone should be. It is faintly, pleasantly warm. A second later, Nia's lips part. Inside the dull stone, threads of orange-red light kindle. The glow is not bright, but it carries something vividly alive in it, like charcoal that a cold wind has just blown back into color. It is lit, Nia says quietly, so I really did meet the standard. I had spoken with total certainty earlier, and she still cannot quite believe it now that she is watching it happen. Then the shock breaks, and a brilliant smile takes over her whole face, and she is simply genuinely happy for me. She says it looks like she will have to start calling me Lord Adventurer. She hides the prop back in the depths of the cabinet, produces an adventurer registration form from her belt pouch, and starts filling it in with big flowing strokes. In the testing method column, she writes the embers of Aradia with real ceremony. Then she looks up, quill hovering over the parchment, and asks what to put in the adventurer title column, whether we are still writing Lance. Her eyes go serious as she reminds me that the guild's internal records must carry real names, but for the title shown to the outside world, she recommends taking a code name. I agree with my entire soul. I understand this principle better than most people alive. An alias is mandatory, and it needs to be wrapped tight. I think about the talents sitting on my body, both of them dragged out of Norse mythology, and I tell her to call it Raven. In Norse myth, the raven is Odin's eyes and ears, and it is also a messenger. The original body spent his life writing letters for adventurers, and once I became a scribe, I spent mine delivering casualty notices. There is no code name that fits better. Naya tilts her head, repeats it, and smiles. Raven, she says, sounds about right for someone with my low-key personality. She writes it neatly into the title column, then pinches both corners of the form and lifts it up in front of me like a certificate of merit. Her face bright as a blooming flower. Congratulations, Mr. Raven, she begins. From now on, you are a true. An abrupt, extremely loud rumble rolls through the quiet warehouse and rides straight over the end of her sentence. Her smile freezes on her face. The rumble came from her stomach. Crimson climbs from her neck all the way to the tips of her ears. She declares it is all my fault, drops the form, and claps both hands over my ears in mortification. Feeling those soft, warm little hands against the sides of my head, looking at a young woman embarrassed to the point of visible smoke, I raise both hands in surrender. 10 minutes later, by way of apology and thanks, the two of us are sitting side by side on a bench in the corner of the Adventurers Guild Hall. I have endured the agony of real expenditure and crossed the street to the bakery for the lunch Nia has been dreaming about. 2 freshly baked specialty herb loaves. They come out plump and enticingly round, crusts baked to a crisp gold, with the baker's rose petal cross-cut into the top of each one, to show the soft white crumb inside. A great deal of work went into the dough, which is kneaded through with fresh rosemary picked from the edge of Copper Creek Forest, and the smell alone starts a fight in your mouth. On top of that, I gritted my teeth and bought a bottle of pink shimmering berry cider. It is a low-alcohol fruit wine wildly popular with the female adventurers of Greystone Town. Crisp and sweet and full of tight little bubbles. Nia holds the bread in both hands and takes a careful bite. The crust and the crumb collide between her teeth, the herbs bloom across her palate, and she follows it immediately with a deep pull of the pink cider. She makes a noise of pure delight, narrows her eyes like a kitten that stole a dried fish, and swings her legs happily under the bench. Watching that carefree face, I touch my now completely deflated money pouch. This single meal has eaten half a day of my wages. It is fine. This is called necessary social investment. I weep quietly inside and take a savage bite out of my own bread. The clerical staff of the Adventurers Guild do in fact get weekends off. It is only that I chose a year-round no-days-off overtime schedule in order to reach Austera sooner. In a border town built around adventurers, most of the local entertainment reeks of hormones and alcohol, and anywhere adventurers gather usually means trouble and conflict close behind. So the man who lives by never joining a lively crowd has always preferred to stay on duty and enjoy the guild's free heating in his spare hours. The occasional card game with a few familiar young ladies is the one exception. The situation is different now. My adventurer identification gets approved tomorrow, and the day after that I intend to take a commission out to Copper Creek Forest. That gives me 2 days to equip myself with the tools of my new livelihood. I slip home after work to change into an unremarkable gray-hooded sweatshirt, then head straight into the messy artisan district. This place lives under coal smoke year-round, and the air carries the sour reek of leather tanning, which is not something anyone enjoys breathing. The blacksmiths and leather shops lining both sides of the street are dazzling to an outsider, and an outsider walking in here gets treated as a fat sheep and shorn accordingly. I am not an outsider. Months of being a transparent person behind the guild counter left me perfectly clear on which shop does honest work and which shopkeeper has a black heart. I move through several reputable old establishments and buy everything I need at fair prices. For the safety of my one small life, life-saving gear is not where a man economizes. The trip costs 8 silver coins and 46 copper. Once I add the backpack, fire-making kit, water skins, rope, and the rest of the adventuring sundries still to be replenished, my not particularly generous savings will be wiped out entirely. Back home, I work my way into all of it piece by piece. Against my body goes treated leather armor reinforced with rivets, with hard iron plates set into the chest and back at the critical points, which raises its resistance to piercing damage enormously. On my head goes a reinforced leather helmet under a thick hood. The cleverest part of the design is at the face, where a half mask runs from the forehead down over the bridge of the nose. It protects that fragile ridge and hides most of my features at the same time. Reinforced vambraces inlaid with iron strips go on my forearms, good enough to stop a slash at the moment it matters. Non-slip fingerless gloves on my hands, thick leather greaves on my legs, steel-toed military short boots on my feet. A standard refined steel short sword rides at my waist and a sturdy wooden round shield sits across my back. With the hood pulled down, I doubt Nia herself could stand in front of me and recognize that this murderous-looking figure is the refined scribe she works beside every day. The whole outfit is heavy, and it does not look like something a rookie would be wearing. Standing in front of the mirror fully armed, I go still for a moment. I was mentally prepared for this, and looking at the shape in the glass still produces an unaccountable feeling of reality. My life really does appear to be about to change. 2 days later, I collect my custom-made adventurer identification. It is a palm-sized metal nameplate carrying complex anti-counterfeiting patterns across the surface, which is encrypted identity information, and the only readable thing on it is my codename, Raven. The rest day arrives with the morning mist still lying over the town, and I am already dressed and moving with a bulging pack on my back. The vast majority of adventurers walk to Copper Creek Forest on their own 2 legs. I go to the town gate early instead and spend a few copper to ride out on a caravan logging cart headed for the forest outskirts to pick up timber. It saves my legs, and more importantly, it buys me conversation with timber merchants who run this route all year long. Where the beasts have been thickest lately, which road has gotten bad, nobody knows better than they do. Today's commission is about as simple as they come. Harvesting copper-cap mushrooms. The fungus is common on the outskirts of Copper Creek Forest, dull brass all over, and it only grows under rotting damp stumps. The reward is correspondingly small, with a full small leather bag going for about 15 copper. This is a welfare posting the guild puts up on purpose. No hard combat requirement, no venturing anywhere dangerous, and perfectly suited to letting a novice on his first mission carefully test the depth of that forest. The wooden wheels roll over the last stretch of gravel and deliver me to stump camp at the forest's edge. Camp is a generous word for it, since the place behaves more like a market that assembled itself by accident. Several Greystone town caravans are parked along the roadside. Townspeople who got here early are hawking steaming broth and cheap black bread at every adventurer who walks past, which fills the air with the smell of food. Groups sit around the enormous dead stumps trading gathered information or hunting for temporary teammates. Nearly everyone here is a low-level adventurer without a professional rank, same as me. The genuine professional rank adventurers, barring a special commission from the guild, went straight for the dungeon a long time ago, where the yield is far higher, and so is the chance of dying. Non-professionals are allowed into the dungeon as well, but there is one hard rule. Every newcomer has to complete a sufficient number of basic commissions in Copper Creek Forest and prove they can survive before they may even apply for entry. It is a threshold, and it screens out overconfident hotheads with brutal efficiency. I approve of it, honestly. Compared to the trash companies of my past life, which would have happily sucked the marrow out of every employee, the Adventurers Guild of Greystone Town clearly understands how to conserve a resource. Dead people cannot keep generating value. A young voice calls out nearby asking whether anyone is looking to team up. I look over and find a young adventurer with a two-handed greatsword recruiting. Thick eyebrows, big eyes, short blonde hair, and the specific energy of a newborn calf that has never met a tiger. He takes his rejection without any temper at all, smiles politely, and keeps scanning. Then his gaze crosses the crowd, lands on me, and lights up. I am currently standing alone in a full set of reinforced leather armor, with a half-covering hood, a short sword at the hip, and a round shield on my back. The whole picture radiates exactly the kind of composed aloofness that keeps strangers at a distance. Naturally, he comes jogging straight over with an enthusiastic grin already loaded. His shouted greeting startles me out of my environmental survey badly enough that I take a step back and put a hand on my sword hilt on reflex. Seeing that much vigilance, he goes sheepish and throws up an apology, asking whether he scared me. Then he introduces himself as Kyle, guesses from my equipment that I am here for a sweep mission, and asks whether I am on my own. He explains that his team is going to wipe out a small goblin nest today, and they are short one experienced hand to anchor the line, and asks whether I might be interested. He adds that it does not matter if the sweep I accepted is not for goblins, since he will hand over half of his own extra reward. There is a novice on the team, which is why he needs a veteran holding the middle. I look where he is pointing. Under the shade of a tree stand 2 men and a woman, the men both kitted out as standard warriors, the only girl carrying a short bow on her back. As expected, you do not see noble spellcasting professionals down at this level. He tells me they all came in from surrounding towns because of the special subsidy decree. They make their living specifically sweeping goblins for the bounty, and every one of them has plenty of experience with the things. His sincerity is not in question. I shake my head anyway. Is he joking? My objective today is to pick mushrooms. I have no intention of provoking anything that moves. Regret crosses his face, but he does not push. Before he goes, he still takes the trouble to warn me about the stream area to the west. If I am running a gathering mission, I should stay away from it entirely. He heard on his way in this morning that a Null scavenger party has been circling there, and it is very dangerous. Then he flashes a huge grin, waves, and jogs back to his people. What a cheerful adventurer. Watching that young team shrink into the distance, I find myself sighing. So not every adventurer is a bandit waiting for an opportunity. There are still decent people out here, and that piece of freely given information nudges my opinion of this crowd upward a fraction. I do not linger at the camp. I tighten my pack, follow the quest map, and push into the density of Copper Creek Forest. According to the intelligence, Copper Cap Mushroom has better than 20 documented growing points inside, and the instant my boots come down on the soft humus of the forest floor, the system interface opens itself in front of me with no warning at all. Map affix loading. Current area the outskirts of Copper Creek Forest rated peaceful and coded green. Environmental stability 97%. Current commission, gather Copper Cap Mushrooms 0 of 30, reward 10 skill experience and 10 knowledge experience. I stand there frozen, reading a string of characters that are simultaneously familiar and impossible. This is from that improper game in my past life. It transmigrated along with me. I focus my attention on that green, peaceful affix, and a detailed explanation surfaces immediately. Peaceful, green, meaning the magic flow in this area runs gentle, and while active on this map, my resistance to abnormal mental effects rises by 15%, while my stamina consumption rate drops by 5. There it is. The classic map affix system intact. I remember that in the game, some of the outrageous high difficulty affixes could double resource yields while carrying side effects that were correspondingly horrific. One genuinely anti-human setting made a successful gather trigger a small explosion. This peaceful entry never existed in the game at all, which suggests the real world has rationalized the mechanic on its way in. No troll entries written purely to torment the player. What actually makes me ecstatic is the line below it. Environmental stability, 97%. In the game's design, once environmental stability dropped under 50%, it meant monsters were about to spawn nearby and a forced encounter was coming. Translated into reality, this is a hypersensitive danger radar. As long as I keep one eye on that number, a steady continuous decline tells me monsters or danger are closing in. I get to use that information gap to grease my heels and evacuate before anything actually happens. With this running, short of actively courting death, ambushing me should be impossible. The original designers used this instead of a mini-map. Its purpose was to work like a compass pointing players toward high-risk locations where rare monsters waited, so they could challenge them and incidentally collect a few unfortunate defeat scenes along the way. In my hands, it is a life-saving amulet. Thank goodness you are still here, I tell that improper game loudly inside my own skull. At the first gathering point marked on the map, I find a decent crowd already working. Seeing a fully armed man walk in, the people bent over rummaging beneath the stumps visibly stall. Most of them are novices who migrated in from the surrounding villages not long ago. One look at their outfits reminds me exactly how lucky I was to have a stable guild job and real starting capital first. A great many low-level adventurers hollow out their entire family's savings simply to scrape together the fee for one proficient rank combat skill. Equipment comes after that, if ever. Forget iron-plated reinforced leather like mine. Most of them cannot bring themselves to buy plain hardened leather goods. What these ones are wearing is layered, coarse burlap padded thick with cotton batting, and its only real job is stopping thorns from opening their arms when they push through brush. As I approach, the wariness in their eyes is not subtle. Out in the wild, on top of the monsters, there is no shortage of red-named adventurers who make a living intercepting and killing their own kind. I do not say much. I nod politely and keep walking deeper into the map. As expected, the safest locations have been picked clean, so I have to hunt down more remote growing points. I walk with my eyes fixed on the number in the corner of my retina. Environmental stability, 78%. The value settles there, and around me the forest goes quiet. I find my target under a patch of rotting deadfall, pull on the non-slip gloves and get to work. 1 of 30, 2 of 30. This fungus grows absurdly fast, and 2 days after a rain, a whole patch of it can come up. I follow the Adventurers Guild manual's harvesting technique to the letter, since damaging the mycelium foundation ruins the entire site. The pace is not quick, but eventually the panel reports the commission complete at 30 of 30 and pays out 10 skill experience and 10 knowledge experience. I check the skill slot, which reads Castro Swordsmanship at level 3 with 3 points of 250, and dump the entire 10 into it. It jumps to 13. In that instant, my mind seems to acquire several days of memory and insight from training I never did. I draw the short sword at my hip and put out a basic thrust, and the movement is a fraction cleaner than it was. The improvement is not obvious. The feeling of it is intoxicating. I sheathe the sword, satisfied. The knowledge experience has nowhere to go for now, so it waits until I get home. Then, just as I move to close the panel, the corner of my eye twitches. Environmental stability, 62%. The number that stood for safety has dropped under the warning line, and in the single second I spend being stunned, it ticks down again. 61. The environment here was so comfortable that I nearly let my guard down entirely. A steady, continuous decline means the surroundings are deteriorating without pause, which means something unknown is tracking the pace of my own movement. I have to go. I check the pack fast. Today's extra gathering has already filled 5 leather bags well past the target. I show exactly 0 greed about it. Pack up, turn around, and run. On the way out, I take the fastest route, which carries me back past the first gathering point. That group in their thin burlap is still down there working. My steps slow as Kyle's warning surfaces in my head, the kind reminder from a stranger who owed me nothing. I hesitate, and then I stop and shout at them that it is not safe around here anymore, and they should all head back. What comes back is a wall of cold stares. One of them looks me up and down, sneers, and says the word coward just loud enough to carry. Rich, cowardly adventurers are the single most despised species in this crowd. And to be fair to them, who dresses like he is going to fight a gnoll in order to pick mushrooms? On top of that, every copper cap mushroom growing point is marked as the safest tier green zone on the guild map. No one here is going to abandon guaranteed profit because a stranger showed up raving. I shake my head. If I cannot persuade them, then their fate is their own business. I do not stay. I leave the forest alone at a full run. The logging cart is not due back yet, so I walk to town on my own legs, which takes a solid hour. To avoid attention, I skip Mia's busy counter entirely and hand the mission in at another one. When the heavy copper coins drop into my palm, I smile underneath the hood. 85 copper. Half a day of work, and the income is a substantial step above a full day of scribing. I count it, go home, take a bath, and change back into clean casual clothes. These 85 copper coins matter more than their weight because they are the first pot of gold I have earned as an adventurer. I intend to spend them on the handful of friends I have in this different world. I turn into the high-end pastry shop like a regular. Out I come with berry cream tarts that no girl alive resists, translucent amber flower honey candies, and vanilla pastries baked crisp enough to crumble at a touch. Paper bag in hand, I head back to the Adventurers Guild. It is nearly dusk and Nia is still holding her post. Wearing heavy specialized leather gloves, she is expressionlessly counting a pile of bloody goblin ears on the tabletop. Faced with a scene that would turn most stomachs, this seemingly delicate receptionist does not appear to find it dirty in the slightest. She finishes the record, hands a bag of silver to the adventurer in front of her, then glances up, spots me in the line, and blinks playfully. During working hours, her professional ethics are considerable. I play along, walk up, set my metal nameplate on the table as though I am another adventurer turning in a job, and quietly monopolize the counter. She pitches her voice into something sickeningly sweet, and asks Lord Adventurer what spoils he wishes to submit. Swallowing a laugh, I produce the bag of flower honey candies from behind my back like a stage magician and hand it over. Nia clearly did not expect anything to be there and opens it to look. Inside sit a few pieces of translucent amber hard candy, each with a whole pink petal sealed dead center, delicate enough to be artwork. It is her favorite thing in the world. Guilty as sin, she checks left and right, confirms nobody is watching, and gets one into her mouth at speed. The sweetness melts on her tongue and her eyes narrow with happiness. I lower my voice and tell her to call Amber and Flora tonight, the old place, cards. She makes an okay sign and answers around the candy that I should wait for her to get off shift. There is still time before the changeover, so I wander over to the commission board on the far side of the hall and start reading the slips. I am seriously weighing whether to resign as a scribe and change classes into a full-time adventurer. A system that displays environmental values is practically tailor-made for gathering work, and on that alone I could pull decent profit while dodging the risk entirely. What I still need is a trip to the bookstore to cram potionology and botany, so that when I stumble across rare material outside my commission, I do not walk past it like an idiot. I am staring intently at one piece of parchment when low conversation drifts up behind me. Something big happened east of Copper Creek today, one of them says. It sounds like a large Knoll group worked with goblins to set a trap and ambush several teams running missions out there. Another says he is glad he did not go. He heard one team even brought a newcomer along, planning to challenge a small goblin nest, and they still have not come back, which looks grim. A third adds that it was not only there, that several copper-cap mushroom gathering points on the outskirts got hit too, and the attack came so suddenly that a lot of people died. They shake their heads, sighing, and start toward the counter to queue up. I hear my own voice cut in behind them, and it comes out more abrupt than I intended. They turn around and find a black-haired young man they cannot quite place. I ask whether that team who never came back was 3 men carrying great swords and axes, with one girl and a short bow. They find me familiar, recognize me as guild staff, and answer politely that yes, that was exactly the setup. One of them adds that the young fellow leading them seemed like a spirited sort, and what a pity. I thank them softly and turn around. I lift my head to the wall covered in commissions, and every plan and every bit of yearning I was holding a minute ago goes flat and colorless in my chest. The card game never got scheduled, since the afternoon had ruined the mood for it. I did not neglect the books though. Sunlight comes through the bookstore windows in golden pillars, with dust turning slowly inside them. Greystone Town has never established a public library, so for ordinary people, acquiring new knowledge means coming here and buying it. In this world, knowledge is a luxury, priced accordingly, exactly like life itself. The owner is an elderly gentleman with fine gold-rimmed glasses on his nose and an expensive linen shirt on his back. Every time I have walked past this place, I have seen the same picture through the window. The old man sits behind his high counter with a cup of steaming coffee, turning the pages of something enormous. I push open the wooden door with the copper bell on it and step into a spacious 2-story shop. The collection here is genuinely deep, running from basic literacy primers up to the latest magic theory journals, all of it filed across rows of tall mahogany shelves. My eye gets caught almost immediately by a large format pictorial book displayed in a prominent position. Austera Scenery Pictorial, Summer Edition. Something in my chest lights up and my hand moves before my judgment does. The cover opens onto a wall of luxurious foreign glamour. The pages are expensive coated stock, showing towering white bell towers and enormous sailing ships cutting through swell. The remaining 60-odd pages document the customs and practices of Austera in heart-pounding detail. A graceful fox-person girl glancing back over her shoulder in a lounge, the down on her ears individually visible. A noble, aloof elf ranger drawing a longbow with a sharp gaze. A succubus in daring clothing, heart-shaped tail curled, throwing amorous looks straight through the paper at the reader. This was made by a professional, and the artist mixed a trace of illusion dust into the pigments. As I look, the still figures create the illusion of slow movement, right down to the lifelike sway of the fox-person girl's skirt. It really is a fine piece of work. Purely as an appreciator of art, I examine every page with great care. Then I check the price on the back cover and put it back where I found it. Today's budget is limited, and there is no spare money for spiritual sustenance. Definitely next time. I collect myself and start working the shelves for what I actually came for. Not browsing this place earlier means I have been missing treasures for months. In one corner, I even find a volume called Detailed Explanation of Advanced Skills for 3 Dragon Cards, and nearly chop my own hands off to stop them buying it. Rounding the corner of a tall shelf full of herbalism, I nearly walk straight through someone coming the other way with an armload of books. Neither of us can see past the shelf, and neither of us can stop in time. There is a soft impact, and a figure who does not reach my shoulder rocks back a step. She apologizes, voice soft and a little sticky with panic. I look down and find a young woman in a beige long dress with a dark brown apron over it, herbal patterns embroidered across the front, radiating a quiet scholarly air. Her head is down as she apologizes, and 2 iconic braids hang forward over her chest. I try her name, Flora. She looks up at the familiar voice, and once she registers who it is, something pleased flashes through those fawn eyes. She asks whether I am here to buy books too. I smile, nod, and ask her, curious, whether she should not be helping out at Aunt Novena's potion shop at this hour. Flora smiles a little sheepishly and lifts the heavy hardcover in her arms like a presented treasure, the gilt letters flashing in the sun. Viridia Publication, basic potion manual most suitable for alchemists. She tells me Aunt Novena sent her to buy it. Undisguised excitement leaks into her voice as she adds that her aunt says she has mastered the basics and can start learning real alchemy. That name lands with weight. Viridia means emerald crucible in the common tongue, and it is the holy land in the heart of every life alchemy school in the continent, the place nearly every current potion formula and theory descends from. Being handed a book of that pedigree means Flora is no longer the little apprentice who was only allowed to chop herbs. I ask her whether she is finally going to start brewing, genuinely delighted for her, and congratulate the future alchemy master. Praised like that, Flora breaks into a sweet smile that brings out the dimples on both cheeks, and it is unreasonably cute. Then she gathers herself, looks up puzzled, and asks what I am hunting for, offering to guide me since the classification system here is a mess and she knows it well. I am not about to be polite about a free guide, so I describe exactly what I need. She nods and leads me through 2 rows of shelving to a section against the wall, then points and tells me it is all right here. I spot my target at a glance. Copper Creek Herbs and Minerals Illustrated Guide, and right beside it sits a thick black volume that interests me considerably more. Copper Creek Forest Monster Manual. I pull it out and open it, and a few pages in, I am genuinely shaken. The contents are on an entirely different level from the thin introductory pamphlet the Adventurers Guild hands out free. Every entry carries detailed text plus a rough sketch whose features are unmistakable. The camouflage on a goblin nest entrance. The distribution rules of a slime core. How to read a gnoll's coat color to determine its professional tier. The emergency avoidance posture for a corrupted wild boar. Every single detail is on file. I am still wrestling with whether the monster guide belongs on my must-buy list when Flora, digging around the shelves nearby, lets out a soft sound of triumph. Found it, she says. She goes up on her toes to pull a dark green volume out from between 2 enormous tomes, turns around and pushes it into my arms like she is presenting a gift. Basic botany and simple potion making. She tells me that if I want to learn to identify wild herbs, picking this up alongside them will help a great deal. Then she puts her hands behind her back, tips her head up at me, and the 2 signature dimples appear. She adds that it records some very basic potion making techniques, and once I learn them, they can bring in a decent amount of extra money on the side. Everyone in that little circle watched me grind through those months. Standing there under that sincere look, something warm goes through my chest. And the thank you I give her carries more feeling than I meant to put in it. We carry our selections to the counter, and the moment the old gentleman quotes a price, my relaxed expression freezes solid. These 3 books are priced obscenely, somewhere between 2 and 4 silver coins apiece. I run the arithmetic fast. This stack of paper costs more than the iron-plated armor currently sitting in my wardrobe. No wonder this rundown shop is always empty. This is not bookselling, this is robbery with a receipt. I touch my money pouch with some embarrassment. The joy of my windfall evaporates completely, because even by the friendliest estimate I have enough for exactly 1 of them. I am still deciding which 2 to put back when a fair, slender hand reaches past me and sets a few bright silver coins on the counter. Flora tells the old man to ring them up together, and her voice is soft, and in my ears it sounds like a goddess descending into the mortal world. So in the end, on Flora's financing, I carry 3 heavy volumes of knowledge home. On the way out, I pat my chest and swear to pay her back the moment I have money. Flora does not appear to mind at all, and just smiles and waves as she hurries off to help at the potion shop. For the next several days, right up to the next rest day, life goes back to its old shape. By day, I am the low-key scribe at the Adventurers Guild. By night, I am at the old place with several young ladies playing 3 dragon cards. Whatever hours remain, I spend hunched over those hideously expensive books. Hard work pays. The botany entry surfaces on the system panel soon enough, and to my surprise, it does not appear under skills at all. It carves out an entirely new classification for itself. Knowledge, Botany, Level 1, 2 points of 1,000, a brand new column. Compared to skills, raising knowledge is obviously far harder, since the experience ceiling for a single level is several times larger. I try injecting the 10 points of knowledge experience from the earlier quest into Botany, and the moment it goes in, something strange floods through me. It is not the simple installation of a memory. It feels as though isolated points of knowledge sitting inert in my head have come alive and started sprouting fine tendrils that reach out toward territory I have never studied. The book, for instance, records a cut mushroom growing in Copper Creek Forest. All I knew was that it is non-toxic, has a crisp texture, and works as emergency food in the field. Under the knowledge extension, a flash of insight hands me a characteristic nobody wrote down. The cap structure is unusual, capable of filtering dew and holding it in the center of the cap, which means in a water emergency it can be consumed directly as fresh water. That was not stuffed into my head from nowhere. It was logical deduction extended out from what I already understood, which is genuinely magical. Better still, the growth is completely stable and has turned into my own instinct rather than borrowed information. If I keep feeding this column knowledge experience over the long term, I suspect the breadth of what I know will pass the so-called seasoned scholars before long. Neither the Copper Creek compendium in my hands, nor the potion book Flora recommended contains a single word about cut mushrooms storing water. That is not because the knowledge is rare. It is because the author, limited by length or by focus, simply left it out, and the system fills in exactly those omitted margins. With the knowledge column open, a new functional module unlocks at the bottom of the panel. Research section. I raise an eyebrow at it, because this existed in the original game as well. Research ran in two directions there. The first was biological research, which veteran players exploited to the absolute limit, since researching a specific species in depth raised your damage numbers against that species. As for what sort of damage specifically, those who understood. The other direction let you extract special physical bonuses from different types of demi-humans through study, purely so you could handle them better. I remember perfectly well what I did to unlock a special interactive scene called Deep Sea Kiss. I spent an enormous amount of time researching aquatic monsters, and ultimately pulled underwater breathing off a certain merman, which let me dive to the seabed. Evidently, that function has been adapted to reality just as cleanly as everything else. For the moment, the biological research column is completely empty, which suggests I have to make actual contact with living species other than human before any entries populate. The potion research column, on the other hand, already has its first project refreshed. Hemostatic ointment, marked as improving. It is the simplest recipe in the basic botany and simple potion making I was reading a moment ago, and I had not expected it to feed straight into research. That ointment is a permanent resident in every adventurer's pack, and a small jar of it sells for better than 20 copper. The primary ingredient is a low-tier plant called coagulation moss. The first research quest the system hands me is extremely down-to-earth. Personally collect and dry produce 30 ounces of coagulation moss powder. By this world's measures, an ounce is roughly the weight of one kingdom gold coin, so 30 ounces of finished powder comes to close on 2 pounds. Accounting for loss during drying, that means harvesting a serious quantity of raw material. Coagulation moss is not rare in the forest though, so I intend to simply pluck it casually next time I take a quest. What genuinely pulls me in is the projected reward. The effect line promises medium speed enhanced coagulation on small to medium cuts, forming a protective medicinal film that carries a slight enhanced anti-infection property. Ointment made by everybody else runs at normal speed and carries no anti-infection component whatsoever. I have no idea precisely how much faster medium speed enhanced runs compared to market stock, but that anti-infection line is a divine gift for staying alive. When you are hurt out in the wild, the thing that kills you is rarely the bleeding. It is the fever and the complications that come up out of an infected wound. Once I finish researching this recipe, the ointment coming out of my hands will make everyone else's product irrelevant on effect alone. There is nothing in any world more obscenely profitable than owning the core technology. In a society built on swords and magic, wealth and risk are twin brothers who never travel apart. The merchant tycoons famous across the continent are almost always professionals, with real power behind them, because wealth only belongs to you once you are strong enough to guard the vault yourself. I understand that principle down to the bone, which is why I will not pass up any chance to make myself stronger, provided the risk stays inside a range I control. Another rest day. I stand fully armed at the mouth of Copper Creek Forest again. Today's commission is silver leaf vine sap, a base material for gray leaf tincture, which is the most common antidote ingredient on the market. The plant is fussy about humidity and grows almost exclusively on the ancient oaks near Whisper Waterfall. Because the potion shops burn through the stuff, the guild sends people out every few days to clear the route to the gathering area. In theory, that makes it an absolute safe zone with no chance of running into a monster. Theory is the operative word. The magic inside Copper Creek Forest has been rioting, which has made the outer belt unpredictable in ways nobody can chart. The copper cap mushroom postings, always the most popular, were snapped up long before I got to the board. So I compared 7 or 8 gathering commissions, weighed each one, and picked the safest thing left. Having chosen to be an adventurer, I cannot dodge every risk in existence. As long as the risk stays inside a range I can control, it is worth trying, and I still have a cheat that reads environmental stability out of thin air. Then my boots cross the tree line, and the system hands me a very unpleasant surprise. Current area, the periphery of Copper Creek Forest, rated restless and coded green. The affix explains that the upper and lower swing of this area's environmental stability has been adjusted to 5%. Gathering here carries a 20% chance of extra harvest, and stamina consumption rises by 10%. Below that sits my commission. Gather silverleaf vine sap, 0 of 10. Paying 10 skill experience and 10 knowledge experience. The stamina penalty I ignore outright. For a man carrying Fergalmir's Surge, a stamina bar is functionally infinite. What unsettles me is that swing. It used to vary by 1% at a time. Now it jumps in 5s, which means danger can arrive with no runway at all, and my reaction window has been cut down to a sliver. So the reports circulating inside the guild were not exaggerating. The forest is deep into a magic disorder period, and while the yields have gotten richer, the monsters have gotten manic in exact proportion. That also explains the horrifying business earlier where gnolls and goblins actually cooperated on an ambush. Thinking about goblins puts undisguised disgust on my face. That species is a cancer growing straight through the ecological chain. According to the Copper Creek Forest Monster Manual, Goblins survive their natural predators in their harsh habitat through a reproduction rate that is genuinely frightening. A female's pregnancy runs a ridiculous 2 to 3 months, and a single litter comes out around 8 strong. Worse, those cubs need only 3 years to reach adulthood and start breeding themselves. Across the entire pyramid of intelligent species, that reproductive efficiency sits at the very top, and human beings look like turtles beside it. Adventurers wipe out a tribe, and within a year a fresh clan sprouts like weeds in some other dark corner. On top of that, the surface is never where the bulk of them live. Their real world is the tangled, lightless maze underground, and all humanity can manage is clearing the surface wanderers often enough to stop the overflow. What a disgusting, intractable race. Their genetic stability is also appalling, which means they throw off terrifying subspecies on a regular basis. There are hobgoblins with absurd strength, bear goblins with hide-like armor plate, and goblin sorcerers who can actually cast. For a normal adventurer, any one of those is a death sentence. I run all of that back through my head while watching the trees, gathering low-value herbs as I pass them, and keeping one eye locked on the number pulsing in the corner of my vision. The whole route stays quiet, and when I reach the gathering point, the silence holds. Very few adventurers are willing to come this deep right now, and today I have not seen a living soul. Every team with real strength went off to take the better-paying subjugation contracts against the rioting monsters. I stop in front of an ancient oak wide enough that 3 men could not reach around it. Several thick dark green vines coil the trunk like snakes, and the distinctive heart-shaped leaves catch the light coming down through the canopy. Silver flashes along every vein, which is exactly where the silver leaf vine got its name. I draw the short sword and open a shallow cut in the skin of a vine. Sticky clear sap wells out, and the air fills with a faint sour stink. I get the prepared glass bottle under it and start collecting, glancing at environmental stability every few seconds while I wait. Good luck holds. All 10 bottles fill without a single abnormality, and the panel confirms the commission complete and pays out 10 skill experience and 10 knowledge experience. I wrap each bottle in cotton cloth so nothing shatters if I have to move fast, then stow the whole lot in the pouch at my waist. I am not in a rush to leave. Since I am already here, the waterfall is worth a look, partly because sap has left my hands sticky, and I want to wash them. Mostly because coagulation moss loves the dead wood around a waterfall more than anywhere else. I check the number. 72%. Not high, but inside a restless zone that still counts as the safety line. Whisper Waterfall throws vapor through the whole clearing, and moss-covered dead trunks lie crisscrossed along the bank. I put the new botany knowledge to work, carefully sorting one species of moss from another, and it does not take long. On the shaded side of a huge piece of deadfall, I find a patch that looks like red fluff. Scraped down, it feels tacky. There is a dense white mycelium web underneath, and up close, it carries a faint smell of rust. That is the core material for hemostatic ointment. The panel gives me a point of botany knowledge for finding it. An unexpected harvest. Practice really is the best teacher. I am delighted, and I am about to strip the whole log when instinct pulls my eye to the corner of my vision. The number that was comfortably green a moment ago has jumped to 67 with no warning at all. My expression changes on the spot. I stop caring about the moss beyond what is already in my hand, shove that into the bag, and turn to leave. Greed is an adventurer's original sin. The instant that value starts swinging, walking away is the only survival option on the table. I make maybe 40 feet back the way I came. The number does not rebound. Instead, it drops like an elevator with a cut cable. 62, then 57, then 52. My feet stop and cold sweat comes up across my back in one sheet. If the problem were that I had walked into a dangerous area, then retreating out of it should push the value back up. Instead, it keeps falling no matter which direction I move. There is only one explanation for that. I did not walk into danger. Danger is walking into me. I am surrounded. The number on my retina thrashes. It punches through 50%, and the reassuring green flips to a hard scarlet. Somewhere in the tall, dense trees, I catch fast, heavy breathing, and under it a shrill, scraping squeal like nails dragged down a blackboard. The sound is not loud. It still crawls up the back of my scalp. Hearing it, I actually relax slightly. That is the communication call of a goblin. The bestiary says their sense of smell is startlingly sharp and comes with a nearly diseased fixation on blood and rot. So the sap and the moss I have been handling advertise my position for me. Now that I am alert, my perception, which sits at 5 points, earns its keep. My eyes go over the terrain like a hunting bird's, and I find them fast, a few dark green shapes crouched in a bush, the wrong color against fresh emerald grass. 2 things matter right now, counting the enemy and choosing the ground. The newcomer's adventure guide is blunt about it. A lone adventurer facing a small goblin group must claim favorable terrain immediately, because in open ground their numbers will wrap around you. My peripheral vision has already found a concave rock wall behind me. I raise the round shield without hesitating and back toward it in steady, measured steps. The goblins in the brush read the intent. They stop hiding, boil out of the grass, and start howling, which is their standard hunting method, using noise to panic the prey into showing a gap. With sunlight coming down through the canopy, I finally see what these legendary monsters actually look like. They stand about as tall as an adult's waist. Their skin is a sickly dark green, wrinkled and studded with pustules, and long pointed ears hang loose on either side of their bald heads. Their eyeballs are a cloudy yellow and their mouths are crowded with ragged brown teeth. Fortunately, this squad numbers only 4, and what they are swinging are sharpened sticks and crude clubs made of animal bone. Half the tension goes out of my chest. These are the mob among mobs, the absolute bottom rung of goblin society. Watching me keep backing up in a defensive posture, the 4 of them stop, scoop up rocks, and start throwing hard. Fist-sized stones come whistling in. My perception is more than enough to track projectiles moving this slowly, so I step slightly aside or angle the shield to meet them. They hammer into the thick cowhide over the wood with a dull thud that numbs my arm a little. These scrawny things hit far harder than their bodies suggest. That is also when I discover the fatal hole in my kit. I have no ranged weapon. Inexperience, plainly. If I had a hand crossbow right now, or even a few throwing knives, I could answer in the gaps between their volleys and finish this much faster. Next time that gets fixed. I keep the review running in my head and keep backing up methodically. My plan was to draw them into charging me at the stone wall. What I did not account for was how cunning these things actually are. They may be stupid, but they are not mindless animals. They have decided my heavy equipment makes me slow and they intend to bury me under rocks until my stamina runs dry. Unfortunately for them, what they picked a fight with today is a cheater. While I block and retreat, I keep my breathing on rhythm, and every breath puts back the trickle of stamina the last one cost. By the time my back reaches the hard stone, those 4 have been throwing rocks for what feels like half a day without opening a single scratch on me. They, meanwhile, are bent double and gasping, tongues nearly out. They look at an adventurer in full armor with his face hidden behind a mask, whose breathing has not so much as stuttered. Inside those walnut-sized brains, something registers as being toyed with. To them, I have become an iron-shelled turtle refusing to leave its shell. The lead goblin lets out a piercing hiss. They raise their crude weapons, howl themselves brave, and charge. Normally, they prefer scattered flanking and ambush, but my back is on stone and loose rock blocks both sides, which forces them into the stupidest option available, a frontal assault. 15 feet. 10. My eyes go cold. A wooden spear comes at me straight on, and I do not block it. I step hard into the charge and drive the round shield out like a wall dropping. The impact throws the 2 lead goblins completely off balance and they go tumbling across the ground like dropped gourds. In that exact instant, the fine steel short sword in my right hand goes out like a viper leaving its hole. The whole soul of Castro's swordsmanship is this: the merciless close-range stab in a muddy trench, and at level 3 proficiency the blade moves like a thunderclap. The point sinks precisely into the face of the nearest one. Dark green blood sprays, and the stink of it arrives a half-second later. It never gets a scream out. I put a boot into the corpse's chest, use the leverage to pull the sword free, then bring the shield back in and reset into guard. Steady enough to make your hair stand up. The other one that went down scrambles back to its feet on all fours, the bone club shaking in its grip, and every trace of that arrogant howl is gone. Ferocious as they are, a clean instant kill deters them just fine. Now would be the moment to run, if they were going to run. But I know exactly what creatures like this do. They bully the weak and fear the strong, and if you let one escape, it will lurk in the dark like a fly, harassing you and fouling everything you try to do. Against goblins, an adventurer follows exactly one principle, which is to pull the roots out. While the remaining 3 are still deciding whether to advance or run, I move. I stop defending and drive a short, vicious charge behind the shield. The rim shoves the nearest wooden stick out of line, and a standard military thrust follows it in for the second. A heavy sweep and then a downward stab to finish takes the third. I run down the one trying to flee and put the short sword through its back. Less than 10 seconds. In a clearing that was full of noise, the only sound left is the last one dying. I walk over, pull the sword out of its back, and put it through the throat to end that. Then I do not sheathe. I go to each corpse in turn and put another stab into something vital. More than a few rookie adventurers have been killed while looting because they never learned that goblins have an exceptional talent for playing dead. That lesson was bought with a great deal of other people's blood. Only once the ground is genuinely silent do I let out a long breath. Through the whole fight, I was as calm as a man working an arithmetic problem. If any veteran adventurers had been standing here to watch, I suspect they would have had exactly one comment. Steady as an old dog, they would say, being this careful over 4 goblin mooks. No experience prompt though. I glance at the panel and it sits there, unmoved. So the kill monsters and level up experience bar was never implemented into the real world. Or possibly it is because I am not a professional, since I have heard that some professionals do improve through combat directly. For now, if I want skill or knowledge experience, I will have to get it by accepting formal monster sweeping quests at the guild. I should also go ask what this world's professional system actually consists of. Checking again, I find there were implicit gains after all. A faint line of small text sits below. Castro swordsmanship proficiency, up 4. I raise an eyebrow at that, because it is a real number. Grinding sword swings alone in a room. That same 4 points would take an uninterrupted hour or so. Nothing teaches like actual bloodshed. I squat down, breathe through the stench, and cut the left ears off all 4. I did not accept a sweeping quest, but the guild still exchanges ears for bounty as proof of subjugation. Roughly 20 copper each, which makes 80 for the set. A pleasant windfall. Then I go through their ragged belt pouches and find moldy berries and a handful of unidentifiable teeth. Nothing else. What a pack of penniless wretches. I wipe the foul blood off my gloves on the grass and check the number again. Environmental stability is climbing back toward a reassuring green. That does not make the area safe, and nobody can tell me whether this patrol going missing will pull a larger force out of some nearby lair. So I am not greedy. I pack the loot, turn, and move fast for the tree line, because the guild needs to hear about conditions out here. I go straight back to the Adventurers Guild with the hood pulled low enough to leave only the bottom of my face showing, and I pick the handover counter with the shortest line. I push across a full bag of silverleaf vine sap and 4 dripping goblin ears. The receptionist counts it out without blinking. When the money pouch lands in my palm, the weight of it fixes my entire mood. Nearly 2 silver coins. That is 4 days of scribe wages. Even licking the smallest mouthful of blood off a blade beats grinding calluses behind a counter. The coin is not all of it. Because I reported the intelligence about monsters circling that collection point, the guild issues me 2 merit points on top. Merit is the guild's internal honor system, and adventurers who accumulate it can raise their access permissions and trade it for things money cannot buy on the open market. That covers deep monster knowledge compendiums, potions and equipment carrying real magical effects, professional information, and special skills. In Greystone Town, those are scarce resources you cannot purchase at any price. On my way out, I glance at the notice board in the middle of the hall, and it is exactly what I expected. The Magic Riot has filled it with sweeping commissions stamped in red ink. The purpose of those is blunt. Clear the monster threat out of a defined area so the gathering crews can follow behind. They pay a heavy bounty, and a serious pile of merit points with it. I look at them with some envy, because the guild's rules are rigid here. Solo adventurers are capped on how many commissions they can hold, limited by carrying capacity and by safety. Only registered squads can break past that ceiling and run multiple sweeps at once. I have heard that genuinely ranked professionals can also claim exclusive commissions on the strength of their grade privileges. Some high-difficulty subjugation contracts run for months, and the guild quietly allows those people to pick up small jobs along the way while they track. I am still staring longingly at the high reward slips when a slightly boyish voice speaks up behind me, asking whether I am here to take a sweeping quest. I turn around and find a blonde youth standing there, 16 or 17, with a face that is not entirely finished being a child's. The short sword on his hip tells a different story though, because the wear marks on that hilt do not belong to a pure novice. Something about his face is familiar. I have seen him somewhere. Seeing me look, he straightens up and introduces himself as Damien. He tells me he just got back from White River City, that he registered as an adventurer today, and that he is putting together an adventurer squad of his own. Expectation flickers across his face as he adds that the squad's opening goal is sweeping the goblin lairs around the town. Then, clearly worried that a young face is not persuasive, he digs a piece of parchment out of his pocket, his adventurer qualification certificate, and tells me not to judge him by his age. He has already trained 2 separate swordsmanships. His primary sword form has reached proficient, and even his secondary has been drilled to adept. He lifts his chin with real pride and says he is pushing toward the swordsman profession, and he is only 1 step away. Then he looks at me with his whole heart in his eyes. He has clearly noticed my equipment and my steadiness and wants to recruit me. As his voice trails off, a prompt box drops onto my retina. Key information detected. Swordsman qualification requirements. The profession requires basic attributes of Strength 10, Agility 8, and Perception 8. It requires the primary swordsmanship at level 5 and Expert, the secondary at level 4 and Proficient, and the practice of 1 swordsmanship-type breathing combat method. The trial requirement is independently killing 10 different types of monster using swordsmanship. And there is an additional condition that the candidate's swordsmanship must carry a certain amount of renown within a region, which grants a slight professional bonus once achieved. Looking at that dense wall of data, my chest goes tight. So that is the secret of a professional. A normal adult sits at 5 points across every stat, and the strength line alone demands double that. That list of requirements would make an ordinary man back away in despair. I take a second, quieter look at the youth in front of me. Never mind how tender that face is. On those 2 high-level sword skills alone, if we actually fought, A half-monk cheater like me might not win. His stamina is the only thing capping him, and in a pure burst of strength, this kid is a genuinely dangerous piece of work. He is a prodigy. That is my honest evaluation, and the longer I look, the stronger the familiarity gets. That golden hair. Kyle, the young man with the greatsword, had hair exactly that color. I drop my voice, pushing it deep and hoarse, and ask why he came back from White River City. I hold his eyes and point out that it is the commercial heart of the province, far richer than Greystone Town. With talent like his, it would be smarter to stay there and grow. Every trace of light in Damien goes out at once. His hand tightens on the hilt at his waist, the one his older brother gave him, and he does not answer for a long moment. When he does, he tells me tuition at the White River City Swordsmanship Academy runs 5 gold coins a semester. 1 more year of study and he would likely pass the assessment and take up swordsman. With the excellent ranked talent his mentor graded him at, the city's defense knight order would certainly have taken him. That meant a steady salary, a big house, and bringing his brother over to a good life. For a moment that hope is actually visible in his eyes. Then it goes out, like water thrown on it. Because his brother is not here anymore, the person he was working for is gone. He tells me his brother used to be an adventurer in this town, and that his name was Kyle, that letters and living expenses arrived on time every single month, that every letter described which monster tribe he had cleared lately, what enormous bounty the guild had paid, how comfortable his life had become, that he told his little brother not to save money and to eat whatever he wanted. He wrote that he was a famous adventurer in Greystone Town, that he had built a powerful team, and that people respected him here. Damien's voice starts to shake. He says that a week ago he came back to collect the belongings, and what the guild staff put in his hands was a shriveled, moldy money bag. There were no gold coins in it, only a dozen badly worn coppers and half a piece of uneaten black bread, hard as a rock. His grip on the hilt goes white. He says that bag was recovered later, when other adventurers swept the goblin tribe that killed him, dug out of the lair of those beasts. Among the belongings was a letter his brother had written to him, but never sent. In it, his brother told him to study hard, and said he was the pride of the family, and had to become a respected noble knight one day. His eyes are red now. He looks up at the hood, hiding my face, and demands to know how he is supposed to keep studying. He says his brother was never a famous adventurer at all. He was a liar who would not spend money on the most basic protective potions, because he was scraping together tuition. A single bottle of maintenance oil that Damien used to waste on sword practice could have covered half a month of his brother's food. This skill of his was stacked up 1 goblin at a time, paid for in bloody copper coins. Then he says I asked him why he came back. He scrubs his face hard with his sleeve, and his swollen eyes look like something burning. He does not want to be a noble knight. He wants to be his brother's little brother, take up the wish, and stand in his place as a real adventurer. He wants to kill every goblin there is. He asks me if I will help him. He puts out his hand. It is a young hand. It is also covered in the calluses that only come from sword practice. I look at that hand. I know perfectly well what happens if I take it. With this kid's talent and my system behind it, an adventuring party famous across the world might genuinely start right here, at this counter, on this afternoon. What Damien actually sees is a hooded man he cannot get a look at, shaking his head without any warmth in it. His hand freezes in the air, and his eyes go completely lost. He asks whether it is because he is not strong enough yet. I do not hand him cheap comfort just because his story is a tragedy. If anything, my voice comes out colder. I tell him he has one thing badly wrong. If I were him, I would walk to that counter right now and cancel that foolish application to recruit a new team. Stop thinking about founding a squad and being somebody's captain. Go find a veteran team that needs muscle, even if the role they hand him is hauling luggage and doing labor. Go watch how veterans actually run a commission, and learn properly how they sleep rough, how they judge a water source, and how they run for their lives. Use that proud swordsmanship as a bargaining chip, and trade it for the survival experience stored in those old men's heads. I step forward and look down at him through the hood. A person who only knows how to fight is not an adventurer, I tell him. That is called a reckless brute. Only by staying alive can he kill enough goblins to avenge his brother. Then I give him no room to argue. I pull the hood tighter and start walking for the guild's main doors, and I throw the rest over my shoulder without turning around. There is plenty of trash in this guild killing time, and there are also real masters in it. If he does not want to fail his brother's expectations, then the first thing he learns is how to survive like a cockroach. Do not let him die for nothing. I wave a hand, push the door open, and lose myself in the street traffic. Behind me, Damien stays exactly where he is. He watches the direction I went long after I am gone, and something in that chaotic head of his has clearly been hit hard. Not one word of what I said to him was false. Stay alive is not advice I hand out. It is the first creed carved into my bones from the day I woke up in this world. In a place this cruel, you have to be breathing before you are allowed to have ideals. Behind that guild counter, I watched too many adventure stories end. Some were driven by dreams, some were eaten by greed, and some, like Kyle, carried a weight to protect somebody at home. However good the intention was, most of them fell on that thorn road and paid for it with everything. The Ring of Ouroboros did give me the capital for unlimited trial and error, and with it the nerve to face this world head-on. It is not only a gift, though, it is also a door standing open over an abyss. Death is the last safety valve on human sanity. A man who has stopped fearing it is not far from being swallowed whole by his own appetite. I have already died once, which is exactly why I understand the weight of a life better than most people ever will. I am never going to lean on that resurrection to indulge myself. It stays what it is, the final fallback, the card that turns a losing fight around, and never a chip I gamble my life with. Carrying all of that, I walk into the grocery store and pay out 10 copper coins with my hand pressed to my chest like a man being robbed. What I get is a small jar of anti-rust grease and a coarse whetstone. That fine steel short sword went through a goblin's face today and came out coated in corrosive monster blood. It needs a thorough cleaning, a proper polish, and a heavy coat of grease against rust, so that it is still sharp the next time I draw it. The wooden shield took a few shallow dents from stones, but the grip is solid and the frame is sound, so it can wait. Basic maintenance handled. I go next door to the weapon shop. I have not forgotten today's lesson. For a man working alone, having no ranged option is a fatal gap. I asked the shopkeeper straight away whether he stocks crossbows, because my impression is that a crossbow is simple to operate, hits hard, and is the obvious pick for a novice. The bearded man shakes his head and points at the longbows hanging on the wall. His advice is that if I am going into the forest or the dungeon, I would be better off not touching that thing. After he explains, I finally understand why nearly every adventurer in the guild hall has a longbow on his back. A crossbow is easy to start with, and in a real adventuring environment, maintaining one is a nightmare. That precision mechanism jams on water, on grit, on a hard knock, and once it breaks in a fight, nobody can repair it in the field. A bow is far simpler, since a piece of springy wood and a tough string handle almost any conditions you can throw at them. In experienced hands, the rate and force of a bow are not behind a crossbow at all. I take the professional's advice and choose a short bow made of hazel. It costs 50 copper coins. What actually hurts is the arrows. Each carved wooden shaft with fletching runs a full copper coin, and I grit my teeth and buy 50 at once, because arrows are a consumable and early practice will chew through them. I do not overreach and buy a heavier hunting bow. This hazel short bow kills out to about 30 paces, which is plenty for a man who has never held one before. Past that distance, I could not hit anything anyway. Shopping done, I go home. Calling it home is generous. It is a cramped single attic room, wide enough for a hard wooden bed, and a square table missing one corner. The only window opens through the slanted roof and lets in a thin allowance of noon light. The walls have been whitewashed with lime and still smell like old wood going soft. For that pigeon cage, where turning around is a maneuver, the rent is 4 silver coins a month. In Greystone Town, that is not cheap. I pay it gladly. The building sits behind the busy commercial street, less than 30 feet off the sheriff's patrol route, surrounded by all-night pubs and inns that stay lit at every hour. The original owner of this body died because he chased a cheap rent on the edge of the slum, which handed that thief his opening. Trading money for safety is in my ledger, the best deal available. When I have real disposable funds, there will be time enough for a detached house with its own courtyard. I drop the pack and take out that damp clump of coagulation moss, then open basic botany and simple potion making and start processing it by the book. With no proper alchemical apparatus on hand, extraction is off the table. All I can do is find a clean piece of linen, pick the dirt and debris out of the moss, and spread it flat on the ventilated windowsill. The stuff grows beside waterfalls, so its water content is enormous and its juice is thick. Primitive air drying like this needs 3 days minimum, and across all 3 I have to keep turning it to stop damp and mold from setting in. If it molds, everything I gathered is ruined. With that handled, I sit on the edge of the bed and call up the panel out of habit, meaning to check on the hemostatic ointment research. The moment it opens, my eye gets pulled to an icon lit up beside it. The biological research section, dead since the day it appeared, is glowing faintly. I stall for a second, then understand. Today, I did not just meet a monster. I killed 4 goblins with my own hands, which is evidently what the unlock condition wanted. A clean line of prompt text surfaces. Valid biological sample detected. Biological research module activated. I focus, and the new page unfolds. The illustration list that was empty now has its first card lit. On it is a squat, snarling green creature holding a bone club, with details written down the side. It reads, creature illustration, demi-human, goblin with current research progress at level 1. 4 of 20. That 4 is the 4 departed souls under my sword today, so I need 16 more green-skinned corpses to fill the first stage bar. That does not look too difficult. I rub my chin. By the rules of that game, every time a creature's research level rose, the player got a special reward, and at research level 3 you could extract the creature's racial talent outright. Goblins sit at the very bottom of the monster contempt chain, which does not mean they are worthless. Quite the opposite, because anything that has propagated like weeds through nature this long is carrying talents a human might genuinely want. Low light vision for one. A creature with it wrings the maximum out of the faintest light, so even deep in a lightless cave it sees roughly as well as a human on an overcast day. For an adventurer who works in dungeons or at night, that is a gift from heaven. Then there is Steel Stomach, which is more outrageous still. It lets goblins digest nearly any organic matter at all, converting raw meat, rotting corpses, or moldy roots into usable energy, and it comes with heavy immunity to most foodborne illness. In a world with no food safety regulations whatsoever, that is a life insurance policy with teeth. I am fully invested in this idea. What I do not know is how the extraction range is actually calculated here. Does it only offer the baseline racial talent, or does it roll across the entire goblin talent lineage, mutants included? I run the monster manual back through my head. Goblins are weak and their genes are a disaster, and across every monster group the pattern holds that the more bottom tier a creature is, the worse its genetic stability. That instability cuts both ways, since it is why an individual goblin is so frail and also why their mutation rate is enormous. Hobgoblins with absurd strength, goblin shamans throwing spell-like abilities, even winged flying goblins. The catalog is genuinely comprehensive. The creatures at the peak run the opposite way. A dragon's racial convergence is extremely high, and its genetic structure is stable as bedrock, which guarantees that every hatchling is born strong. It also means that on the very rare occasion a dragon does mutate, what gets born tends to exceed the racial ceiling and qualifies as a natural disaster. Looking at 4 of 20, I get more eager rather than less. Goblins are the most numerous bottom-tier thing in any monster compendium, so collecting 16 more research points is a matter of spending a little time clearing green-skinned pests. That is not a problem so much as a chore. Of course, in that unserious game, killing was never the only way to raise research progress. Certain specific close-range interactions delivered a great deal of research experience and unlocked exclusive scenes with it. Having now seen a goblin in daylight, I intend to stick firmly to the path of physical transcendence. The bolder methods can wait until I meet a succubus or an elf. The urgent problem is this increasingly unstable environment. The dungeon's mana run away earlier, the widening range of the creatures on the forest fringe, and the source behind both of them is still a fog. I have a very strong feeling about it. The whole region is a pot of water being slowly brought up to heat, and it is getting less stable by the week. Periodic tremors would be fine, but what I am afraid of is that this is the front edge of something much larger. Betting on luck is not my style. Training cannot stop. I say it out loud, looking at the new short bow propped in the corner. To register as an adventurer, I put myself through half a month of brutal training without a break. Then the certificate came through and the tension went slack, and I have not held that intensity since. That will not do. Between hunting goblins for research points and preparing for whatever is coming, the spring needs winding tight again. A man carrying something like Virgilmere Surge, who works in fits and starts like everybody else, is wasting a gift from heaven. While there is still light, I sit at the desk and redo my finances on paper. Right now, I keep the scribe job 5 days a week and spend the other 2 in the forest on risk-controlled gathering commissions. All the extra exercise has pushed my food costs up accordingly. I scratch through the arithmetic and land on a number. After daily expenses, I clear about 16 silver coins a month. Against that, practicing archery and holding my swordsmanship steady means paying the guild logistics department 10 copper a day in venue wear and tear, which is 3 more silver coins a month gone. I look at that figure with a genuine ache and recount it on my fingers twice. Let us observe for a month first. I draw a heavy circle around it. That month is an adaptation period for me and an observation period for the forest. If I adapt and my strength keeps up, I quit the scribe job and go full-time. If Copper Creek Forest gets worse and the safe gathering commissions dry up entirely, I pull back without hesitation. The same goes if the risk climbs past what I can absorb, and I live on a scribe's dead wages. I have no interest in becoming one of those drifting adventurers who packs up and changes towns at the first sign of trouble. My goal has not moved. Bide my time steadily in Greystone Town until the fare to Ostera is saved. And there is Nia's bright face here, and Amber's enormous laugh, and Flora going red to her ears. Those 3 made a strange world feel like somewhere I belong. Struggling alone in an unfamiliar city sounds far worse than staying here and keeping warm together. I do hope that potion research turns out to be worth something. I sigh and look at the moss drying in the shade on the sill. If I land the improved hemostatic ointment formula, I gain another stable stream of income, whether I use the stuff myself or put it out on consignment. As for swordsman, which still looks a long way off, that wall of scalp-numbing attribute requirements is enough to make me shelve any thought of advancing soon. Better to stay on the ground, drill the fundamentals, stack the attribute points high, and plan afterward. Reaching too high too early is a shortcut to dying. I should also start gathering information on other classes, since there may well be one that fits me better. With every goal listed out on paper, the noise in my head finally settles. Outside the window, the sky has gone dark. I push the narrow attic window open and the evening air comes in carrying cooking smells. Down on the street, townspeople who worked all day are drifting home in twos and threes, and children shrieking at playtangle with faint accordion music from the tavern down the road. The whole of Greystone Town is sitting in a warm, lazy orange sunset. That ordinary human quiet unwinds my nerves in a way nothing else does, and I lean on the sill and watch the huge red sun sink behind the hills. Hundreds of miles from Greystone Town, in the northeast of the Iris Kingdom, a river of astonishing width crosses the plain. Because the bed of it is paved in pure white chalk, the water runs milky under sunlight, which is where White River Province got its name. White River City, the provincial capital, sits inside the arms of that mother river. There are no golden wheat fields here, and no herds on the hills. The entire city's prosperity is built on trade, and the pillar holding it up is the industrial chain running out of dungeons and monster materials. White River Province holds the kingdom's densest cluster of caverns, which made it a sanctuary for adventurers by default. Along both banks of a river wide enough for medium merchant ships to pass abreast, tall towers and spires crowd the skyline. Among them stands the most complete set of professional training academies in the province, and well beyond. The last of the sunset is going out now, and the magic street lamps along both sides of the road are coming up one by one in soft warm yellow. The riverside here has nothing in common with Greystone Town's rural calm. It is young and restless. Along the wide slate promenade, students in a dozen different uniforms move in every direction. Some hurry with heavy textbooks clamped under an arm, and others sit in pairs on the benches by the water, talking low. Race barely registers as a boundary here. Alongside humans, there are demi-human students with obvious animal features threading through the crowd. Lizardman swordsmen dragging thick tails, stocky dwarf blacksmith apprentices, quick-footed halflings. It is an open city built out of possibility. From any corner of it, anyone who looks up can see the landmark standing over the White River, the largest magic academy in the city, Violet Academy. Above the central mage tower hovers an enormous ring of linked metal bands and runes, the floating library that every student calls the Ring of Truth. Once night falls completely, the magic array turns that ring slowly, and it sheds white fluorescence like scattered stardust. A galaxy that fell into the mortal world, and stayed. Inside a private office in the tower, the ring encircles. An old man in deep purple mage robe sits behind a desk buried in parchment. He works a silver letter opener under the wax on an envelope stamped with the seal of the White River City Adventurer Association. Official correspondence like this normally goes through the Academic Affairs Office. He knows there is exactly one person alive who would push a private letter through this particular channel. The old bastard out in Greystone Town. Another man who retired from senior adventurer and then refused to be quietly lonely about it. He unfolds the paper and reads it through carefully under the desk lamp. At the last line, he sets it down and shakes his head. He genuinely did not expect this old fellow, who guards his own face like a treasury, to swallow his pride and come begging over something so small. Greystone Town. His gaze goes out the window toward the southwest. That is where their old leader was born. So the man really does intend to take root in that rural place and raise another crop of decent adventurers. 15 days until the golden spike moon, he says aloud, tapping his fingers on the desk. The batch of students who have just mastered basic spellcasting are hothouse flowers, and they urgently need a real storm to be baptized in. He could send them out under the label of an off-campus internship, which solves his old friend's crisis and sharpens the students' practical combat at the same time. 2 birds, 1 stone. Business is business, however. It is rare to see that old fellow this submissive, and a mischievous smile works its way across the professor's wrinkled face. He spreads a fresh sheet of paper and loads his pen. Opportunities like this come once in a lifetime. He packs the reply with sarcasm and lets gloating run visibly between every line. He goes out of his way to drag up several hilarious humiliations from decades back, when the two of them adventured together. Having the upper hand this rarely, he intends to make the man jump with rage and swallow it whole. Picturing that face reading this letter is deeply, thoroughly satisfying. He is writing with great enthusiasm, mouth about to split toward his ears, when someone knocks on the heavy oak door. His expression freezes. At a truly impressive speed, he pulls the smile off his face and gets the letter into the drawer. Then he straightens his back, sets his jaw, and lets his eyes go serious and deep, becoming in 1 second a rigid and dignified professor. He tidies his collar and says, low and grave, that they may come in. The door opens on a soft voice greeting Professor Gideon. Whoever came in does not walk to the desk. She stops at the door and bows toward him with a form so exact there is nothing to criticize in it. Gideon adjusts his glasses and gets a proper look. She is a girl in the prime of her youth, with long hair as white as fresh snow and 2 fluffy buns coiled at either side of her crown. Two finely woven little braids hang from her temples along her cheeks. Her face is a clean oval, and her features look carved out by a painter working slowly. The one obvious difference from an ordinary human is the pair of ears pushing out through her hair, slender, tipped slightly upward, the elven blood in her declaring itself. She is wearing an off-the-shoulder white dress with elaborate ruffles at the collar, an outfit that makes her look less like a student and more like a doll packaged for a shop window. Looking at that outfit, Gideon feels a headache arrive. He rubs his temples and asks whether Cecilia's aunt has dressed her up again. It is phrased as a question, but he already knows the answer, because in all of Violet Academy exactly one person would do this. Cecilia's aunt is also a famous practical combat lecturer here, and a powerful senior adventurer. Her temper runs so hot and her behavior so strange that the other faculties privately call her the Violet Madwoman. Put her in front of her own niece, and that madwoman collapses instantly into a hopeless doting aunt. Her favorite hobby is dressing the girl up like an exquisite doll to satisfy some private costuming compulsion. Cecilia lowers her head, a little embarrassed, and twists the lace at her hem between her fingers. Her aunt said the dress matched today's sunlight very well. Of course she did, as her mentor Gideon feels the helplessness settle in deep. A seedling with this much talent is being led astray by that lunatic. He tells her to sit down first and points at the chair opposite. Once she is seated with her hands placed neatly on her knees, he asks, solemnly, whether she has chosen her professional direction yet. The moment it turns to business, the shyness goes out of her face and her expression sharpens. At Violet Academy, once a student masters basic combat or spellcasting, they all face the same critical fork, choosing a professional development path, and receiving targeted cultivation for it. This is not academic ceremony. Wild adventurers out in the world may not know it, but the academic faction teaches it as basics. A professional's power system is not simple stacking. After the official class advancement, the growth coefficients on physical attributes change in kind, not degree. The weak attributes that were nearly impossible to raise before advancement become dramatically easier once the professional modifiers are attached. That is why the Academy pushes students to satisfy the prerequisites as fast as possible and complete the class advancement ceremony early, so the bonuses compound across the whole growth curve afterward. That is core knowledge no ordinary adventurer ever gets near, an educational barrier built and maintained by expensive tuition. Faced with the professor's question, Cecilia goes quiet. Her bright eyes drop and her fingers find the lace at her hem again. After a long moment, she shakes her head gently. Gideon looks at the girl sitting there like porcelain and sighs where she cannot hear it. He knows exactly why she is torn, and the root of it is her talent. It would drive half the mages on this continent mad with envy, and it has left her stranded because of her blood. It was confirmed after dozens of joint mana retrospection tests run by several professors out of the Academy's Department of Truth. Mana tree, sapling stage, a transcendent level talent. The description says the mana circuits inside her body are exceptionally stable, like the roots of the world tree. The effect is that when casting any spell, she can push an additional 20% of mana past the spell zone ceiling and convert it into pure power. She also carries 30% resistance to the mana backlash that comes from a failed cast. Status: growing. That is the reason they call her the Violet Pearl. In Magic, every spell model has a carrying limit. It is like filling a balloon with water, and past the critical point you do not get more power, you get collapse. The worst outcome is a sympathetic detonation of mana, which takes the caster apart on the spot in a burst of violent elements. Cecilia is the exception. Her talent behaves like a voltage stabilizer and hands her a free 20%, and the amplification applies across every magical system without discrimination. The higher and more destructive the spell, the more monstrous that extra 20% becomes. And this is only the sapling still in a growing state. The old pedants who examined it believe the endpoint of this talent is legendary rank. At that point, it evolves a new trait called absolute casting authority, meaning her spells could never be interrupted by any outside force. She is a siege engine that Magic built on purpose, which is why she was assigned directly under Gideon's name for focused cultivation the moment she enrolled. And the same talent is now the largest obstacle in her path, because the problem is her lineage. She is the child of a human and an elf, a half-elf, and in a professional system with rigid demands on blood purity, mixed blood usually means satisfying nobody. Gideon taps the desk and asks whether she is still agonizing over Mana Bomber. She bites her lip and does not deny it. Mana Bomber is the initial profession in Violet Academy's records that best fits her talent. It first appeared in the era of the third-generation hero and belonged to the chief mage of that hero's party. It maximizes mana output past any reasonable limit and drives destructive power to the absolute edge. Unfortunately, it is a human-exclusive profession, and its employment conditions carry hard rules on human blood purity. On the elf side, every high-tier profession that would suit her demands a pure-blooded elf, which leaves a girl with top-tier talent in the absurd position of having no profession available to take. Gideon gets up, pulls a hardcover book off the shelf behind him, and sets it in front of her. Discourse on the origins of professions. He tells her that what a profession truly is remains unsettled in the academic world. 2 points, however, are universally agreed, the first being great achievement, and the second being the development of the times. He turns to a page, points at the blurred illustrations, and speaks with real weight. In the barbaric era when the first hero walked, the concept of a profession did not exist at all. Those first powerhouses simply tempered themselves without stopping, and when their own ability crossed a certain critical point, they perceived an opportunity for sublimation on their own. They recorded that process, and those records were the earliest. Professionals. The choice back then was simple, he says. When you are strong enough, the laws of the world respond to you. You may take up the profession offered, or refuse it and keep polishing yourself until you find a path that fits better. His voice carries in the quiet office. As the recorders multiplied, later generations followed those footprints and built out a dazzling variety of professional systems. In the beginning, there were only mages, and then one day someone who had absorbed enough evocation theory discovered that the evoker profession was available to him. That is a new profession born out of the way knowledge itself advanced. He pauses. In this world, he says, professional levels are divided cleanly, with levels 1 through 20 falling into 4 tiers. 1 through 5 is normal rank, 6 through 10 is excellent, 11 through 15 is transcendental, and 16 through 20 is legendary. Professions are not fixed, and no absolute hierarchy of better and worse exists among them. Even the most basic mass profession can undergo a secondary advancement by leveling continuously once it reaches excellent, or transcendental. Then he looks at her and gives the advice he actually called her in for. Rare professions do provide special bonuses, he says, but that does not make a mass profession weak. She will have read that later scholars agree unanimously that the first generation of professionals was no weaker than anyone who came after. What those people took up were the most mainstream professions we still have today, swordsmen and mages and thieves and archers. What determines a professional's strength is never the name of the profession. It is personal talent, lineage, the sweat invested, and the skills mastered. Even if she takes up nothing more exotic than mage, with her talent behind it, she will still be the sharpest sword Violet Academy owns. He asks if she understands. Faced with all that patience, a bitterness crosses her small, exquisite face. She shakes her head gently, and a refusal genuinely surprises him. She says very softly that her father has only one child, and that child is her. The words are quiet, and they land like a dropped anvil. Gideon stares for a moment, then slaps his own forehead and complains about his memory, apologizing to the child and blaming the years for how easily he forgets things now. Her full name is Cecilia Rosenthal. Her father is the current head of the Rosenthal family, which holds enormous power across White River Province, and as his only daughter, she will inherit the entire house. And the Rosenthal family has kept one iron rule for centuries. Every generation's head must class change into an extraordinarily specific kind of profession before formally succeeding. Within the professional knowledge system, that kind of profession is 1,000 times more special than any conventional rare class. The academic world has a name for it: Great Achievement Class. For that class, ordinary attribute stacking and skill drilling cannot reach the advancement threshold at all. There is exactly one mandatory requirement: that the candidate accomplish a certain great achievement in this world. As the name says, an achievement where a mortal brushes against the territory of myth. The most famous historical example is the Great Achievement class called Fire Stealer. To take it, the challenger has to successfully steal a top-tier core secret or piece of knowledge from a massive organization holding absolute authority, and then make it public. That alone is not enough. Having published the secret, the challenger cannot run. He has to stay exactly where he is and wait, calmly, and only by surviving that organization's harshest retaliation does the great achievement count as complete and the advancement qualification unlock. Gideon has no idea what specific great achievement the Rosenthal family requires. He does know the universal rule that to attempt an ultimate great achievement class, the heir's initial class must itself be a rare class. That is a rigid threshold, and it is precisely why the common class path he just spent 10 minutes recommending will never work for her. In Violet Academy's current class library, every rare magic system class carries restrictions a half-elf cannot satisfy. He sinks into thought over it. Keeping her here out of institutional selfishness would mean squandering a child with legendary potential. In the Heroes era, talent at this level belonged only to the legendary companions who stood beside the hero himself. The office goes silent. Watching the professor's brows knot, Cecilia lowers her head, feeling enormously guilty for being this much trouble. Gideon finally lets out a long breath. As her mentor, he cannot spend this girl's life buying prestige for the academy. He makes the decision, and it is to write her a recommendation and send her to study with his old rivals in the Southern Mage Alliance, which is an outright disaster for Violet Academy. Heart aching, he pulls the drawer open for a quill, and his eye lands on the half-written letter lying inside. That reply, the one composed purely to mock his old friend out in Greystone Town, seems to glow. An idea goes off behind his eyes. He says her name so suddenly that the guilt-ridden girl jumps and straightens up to answer. Gideon looks at her, and the humor is back in his eyes. Violet Academy, he tells her, is about to enter a cooperative off-campus internship project with the Greystone Town Adventurers Guild, and that branch president in Greystone Town may happen to be holding a lead on a rare mage class with no racial restriction on it at all. He folds his hands under his chin and turns serious. He can recommend her onto that internship evaluation. She can acquire the advancement information for that class. Then he asks whether she has the confidence to face it. The reversal lands like a thunderclap. The dimness goes out of her eyes all at once, replaced by a delight she is not managing to hide. She stands straight up out of the chair and bows deeply. Then she lifts her head with a brilliant smile showing a few neat teeth, short on poise and rich in the liveliness that actually belongs to her age. She promises the professor she will achieve excellence. Seeing his student come back to life, Gideon smiles too. He tells her the internship is 2 weeks out, and that she should go and prepare properly, with particular attention to the wilderness survival material in the Adventurer Manual. Then he sends her off. She thanks him again and leaves with joy in her footsteps. The door closes. Inside the office, the smile slides off Professor Gideon's face and lands somewhere on the floor. Wearing a bitter old expression, he pulls that letter back out of the drawer. Magic gathers at his fingertips, and every dazzling line of mockery and gloating dissolves off the page piece by piece. He takes a deep breath, picks up his pen, and writes a new opening line addressing his dear old brother Necros. 7 days later, early morning, Greystone Town, Adventurers Guild. I sit behind the counter sorting the week's task receipts on autopilot while I take stock in my head. The week has been full and tight. I made time for 2 more trips into Copper Creek Forest, picking unpopular routes both times, and I finally have enough coagulation moss. By the system's progress bar, one final drawing step tonight finishes the research task on the improved hemostatic ointment recipe. That puts a little more confidence in my chest. Sitting right beside it is a growing unease. On every outing, I kept that environmental monitoring keyword active, and what it showed me weighs on my mood. The green keyword for the regional status still reads restless. The line underneath it has changed in a way I do not like at all. The fluctuation range of this region's environmental stability has been adjusted to 8%. A week ago, that number was 5. Those 3 extra points mean the instability inside the forest is escalating, and the casualty reports piling higher at the guild every day say the same thing in plainer language. That urgency is why I have not allowed myself to slack for a moment. This week I threw extra training on top of extra training. Beyond the sword swings, which never stop, I have forced myself to draw the bow at full tension for an hour every day in the training room. I pull up the panel and look at the 2 skill lines. Castro Swordsmanship, Level 3, 176 of 250. After all that frantic sharpening, this military sword form is within reach of breaking into mastery at Level 4. Below it, a new line has appeared. This time, taking the lesson from the botany book, I did not hire a teacher. I spent 6 silver coins on somebody else's manual of archery instead, and sure enough, a skill generated in the slot from reading alone. Paying an instructor last time was, in hindsight, taking a loss. Although that man came out of the Veterans Guild, so who knows, the connection may still be worth something later. Levin Archery, Level 2, 42 of 240. Comparing the two lets me spot a rule. At the same level, archery demands far more experience per level than swordsmanship does, and the attribute feedback runs completely differently. Swordsmanship, practiced from raw novice to here, has scattered roughly 3 points of basic attributes onto me. Archery went up a full level and gave me nothing. So it is not simply that a harder skill yields a bigger improvement. Thinking it through, I suspect the difficulty of raising an attribute is tied to my own base in it. When I first arrived, strength and constitution both sat at 4 points, and back then any casual practice pushed the numbers up like they were being handed out free. Archery, though, most likely feeds perception, and my perception is already above the ordinary person's 5. Reaching mastery at level 2 is probably no longer enough to shake an attribute loose, and I suspect a higher level is required. I can also feel an invisible ceiling somewhere out ahead. It might sit at 10 points, or it might sit at 12. Once a body hits that mortal threshold, physical training almost certainly stops producing anything qualitative. The only route through that wall is likely the professional system, since completing the class advancement ceremony is what unlocks the body's restrictions and lets the climb continue. Whether growth after that comes solely from raising class levels, or whether other methods exist, I have no information at all, which means I need to go get some. The mass market popular science on the bookstore shelves is clearly not going to cut it. I need core professional data, and even fragmentary class information seems to be enough for my panel to reconstruct the whole picture. I am still wondering who to ask when the office door behind me, the one belonging to Supervisor Grayson, swings open. I turn my head and find Nia wrestling an enormous roll of parchment through it. The scroll is clearly heavy, and she is also trying to manage several boxes of thumbtacks in her arms, which has made her walk into something unsteady. She spots me sitting there in a daze and lights up like a drowning woman sighting a rope, freeing one hand to wave and telling me to come help before this thing kills her. I get up smiling helplessly and take the scroll off her. It has real weight, and the thickness and grain of the parchment are far beyond an ordinary commission slip. The top of the page carries the guild's wax seal, stamped hard. I ask what it is while following her to the main bulletin board in the center of the lobby. The latest guild announcement, she says, rubbing her sore wrist and fishing out a thumbtack. That old man of a guildmaster finally could not sit still and is planning something big. It is early enough that only a handful of adventurers are in the lobby sorting equipment, and nobody pays us any attention. I unroll the scroll dead center on the board and help her flatten the corners. The title comes up in a striking red pigment that carries its own killing intent. Copper Creek Forest Region. Large-scale Joint Sweep Commission. I read down it fast. This is a mobilization order aimed at every registered adventurer in the guild. And unlike the scattered squabbling of the past, it divides the forest into battle zones and lays out detailed advance routes. This is not a job posting. This is a localized war against the monsters of Copper Creek Forest. I stand in front of the board and read the whole order through properly. That guildmaster, who normally seems capable of nothing but scheming over copper coins, has committed enormous resources here. The shrewd, calculating old man has pulled a batch of veteran professionals back off the far more profitable dungeon to serve as the spearhead. The order also states plainly that every freelance adventurer must register as part of a squad. The guild will then assign teams to battle zones and push them along fixed routes, combing the region through like hair. Studying the advance map carefully, though, I notice he is not arrogant enough to try sweeping the whole of Copper Creek Forest. That would be fantasy, and only a regular army corps could attempt it. The stated goal is narrower and smarter, pushing the human activity line about 3 miles toward the center while concentrating on the monster nests and hidden caves that actually threaten the outer fringe. Such a big move. I rub my chin over it. That patient, step-by-step strike and hold shape makes me seriously wonder whether the guildmaster served in the kingdom's regular army when he was young. Honestly, I am looking forward to this. If the sweep works, the hazard coefficient on the outer forest collapses and environmental stability rebounds with it. And after that, both gathering herbs and hunting lone monsters get dramatically safer. Naya mentions offhand, sorting her thumbtack box, that she heard it is because the guildmaster reached a cooperation agreement with Violet Academy. The old man is making this much noise mostly to clean up the venue before a group of pampered students arrives. If those students die immediately on arrival, it will be very hard to explain to the academy. Students? I ask why the guild would cooperate with an academy at all. My time in the adventurer world is still short and plenty of it remains opaque to me. She asks whether I have forgotten the dungeon magic runaway a few months back, then holds up one finger and waves it in my face. The people who took the heaviest casualties that day were mages. I nod, because that catastrophe happened not long after I first started at the guild, and it is still vivid. In an adventurer squad, a mage's offensive output is formidable, and their body is the most fragile thing on the team. When sudden risk arrives, their survival rate is the lowest by a wide margin. That single wave broke the generational continuity of local mages in Greystone Town, and today you would struggle to find a person on the street who can produce a fireball. But sweeping missions cannot be run without mages, Nia says. That stops me for a second, and then the stakes come clear. In a standard squad configuration, a mage is irreplaceable. Even apprentices who have not formally advanced carry primary spells with area lethality that no physical class can match. Against a monster tied like goblins, which wins purely on numbers, one mage's ring of fire does more work than 3 warriors swinging swords for half a day. That is before you get to the professional sweeping work itself. Destroying nests, purifying corrupted ground, dispersing toxic gas inside caves. Every filthy, exhausting job on that list requires a spellcaster. Naya adds that the guildmaster believes the forest's deterioration traces back to some latent mana radiation point and turbulence, somewhere inside it, and clearing nodes like that requires mages. Then her eyes sweep the room, and once she confirms nobody is close, she goes up on her toes and puts her hand beside her mouth to speak into my ear. There are a few precious mage professionals left in town, she says, but their appearance fees are terrifying and their energy is finite. That is exactly why the guildmaster set his sights on students instead. Her breath is warm against my ear, which is more distracting than it has any right to be. To put it plainly, she says, he thinks the real mages are too expensive, and the guild has no interest in paying that kind of gullible money. A batch of cheap labor is simply easier to work with. I move half a step sideways, rub my ear, and ask in the same low voice whether all of this came from her vice guildmaster uncle. Her uncle is the deputy head of the Adventurers Guild, an old fox who has spent decades doing administrative work conscientiously. That same uncle also has a bone to pick with me about absolutely everything, purely because he caught me hiding away playing cards with his precious niece several times. In his eyes, I am a bastard corrupting a good child, so on any ordinary day, spotting him means taking the long way around. Naya does not notice my discomfort at all and nods proudly. That is right, she says, and the guildmaster's arithmetic is very sharp. For a batch of interns, the guild pays only a token allowance, provides basic food and lodging, and never has to issue a formal salary at all. Extremely high value for money. She keeps going. Most students who come out for internships have noble or wealthy merchant families behind them, so they are not short of coin. Putting them to work does not merely save wages. In order to show off in front of the person they like or the mentor they want to impress, they will spend lavishly around town out of their own pockets. That solves the forest's mana hazards, feeds the Greystone Town economy, and lets the guild use the Violet Academy partnership as a banner to coax the frightened merchant caravans back. Listening to it, I actually inhale sharply. That is dark, and I mean genuinely dark. This is exactly the internship racket every large company in my past life ran, dressed up in words like experience and certification, using college students as cheap or outright free beasts of burden. You do not pay them, and you also arrange things so they feel grateful and believe they learned something. I did not expect the ugly face of capital to carry over between worlds this faithfully. I say out loud that it is dark, and Nia nods along with enormous feeling, agreeing that the old man is super bad. A dry, boring day of copying ends. I go home, settle dinner with a few pieces of hard black bread and cold water, and slip into the guild's private training room under cover of night. The room is brightly lit, with several guild practice short bows on the wall, and a quiver beside them stuffed full of white feathered arrows. I take one down and test the string tension. By my current plan, an hour of archery every day is non-negotiable, and everything left over goes into swordsmanship, since the sword has reached a critical point and could break through at any moment. I set my stance at the shooting line, breathe deep, and let my eyes sharpen. The grass target 50 paces out is only a blurred shape in this light, and I do not hesitate over it at all. Knock, draw, aim, release. The string sings and the arrow becomes an afterimage before nailing into the red center of the target. That is simply the standard now that Levin Archery has reached level 2 in mastery. At this range, absent a real crosswind, my hit rate holds at a genuinely respectable level. I remember starting out when every arrow cost me 8 to 10 seconds of adjusting my stance, and I still dithered while aiming and missed the target outright. These days, the whole motion runs like water with nothing wasted in it, and from touching the arrow to releasing it takes 3 to 5 seconds, consistently. Monotonous, rhythmic string notes fill the training room. Before long, the few grass targets downrange are studded thick enough to look like hedgehogs, and I have to stop, jog down, pull everything out, clear them, and start again. Any experienced archer watching this would have their jaw somewhere around the floor. This practice bow is not a heavy war bow, and its draw weight is still a full 40 pounds. An ordinary adventurer, even a dedicated archer holding proper form, starts to feel the lactic acid after roughly 40 consecutive shots. The arm shakes, the form deforms, and the accuracy is simply gone. What happens in this room instead is something else entirely. I repeat the shot mechanically and keep a silent count running in my head. Past 486, past 631, past 814, and on to 965. The last arrow leaves my hand and thuds home, and I finally lower my arms. Sweat runs off my chin and pools on the floor beneath me. I hang the bow back on the wall and touch the string. After that much continuous punishment, the tough beast tendon has visibly loosened and gone soft. The owner of the bow is fine. Beyond a sweat, my breathing stayed steady and strong the whole time, and my arms are not trembling in the slightest. I take a few swallows from the water flask and pull up the interface. Levin Archery, level 2, 75 of 240. I run the numbers against it. An hour of extreme training bought about 33 points of proficiency, which converts to roughly 1 point squeezed out of every 30 arrows, like toothpaste from a tube. At that rate, archery breaks through to level 3 in about 5 more days. My eyes drop to the swordsmanship bar, which is nearly full. If today runs lucky, the sword should push into level 4. I wipe my face and lay out the next revision of the plan. Once swordsmanship breaks through, I can shift the proportions and free a second hour for archery, aiming to drag it to level 3 inside 3 days. Looking at the numbers climbing steadily, I frown a little. Still a bit slow. It is a good thing nobody else is in the room. If the adventurers outside heard that, thought they would want to hit me, and honestly, they would be entitled to it. They measure their progress in years while I schedule mine by the day, and this ungrateful specimen is standing here calling it slow. I put the flask down, turn, and take the iron-banded wooden shield off the wall, along with the heavy training sword. This blade carries 30% more counterweight than an ordinary short sword, which is deliberate, because the extra load sharpens my force application technique, There was a very simple reason I picked Castro swordsmanship out of all the basic combat skills on offer. It is an unusually pure sword and shield coordination form. It has no interest in flashy kills and puts everything into the transition between short sword and shield, chasing one objective only, which is keeping the user alive. For a man who values his own small life above every other consideration, no introductory swordsmanship on this continent fits better. I walk over to the wooden dummy I have already hacked into a pitted ruin. Knees soft, weight sinking low. My slightly slower left foot half a pace forward. Most of my body tucked behind the shield. The short sword stays back behind the shield line with the tip angled down toward the ground. That is the standard opening stance. The low center of gravity plants me like a driven nail, which makes it very hard to knock me off balance even when something heavy lands. I settle my breathing and narrow my eyes. The muscles across my waist fire all at once, like a stiff bow snapping open, and drive my whole body forward behind the point. There is no preamble to the strike. The motion is extremely short and the explosive force behind it is enormous, sharp enough to make the air whistle. It was this exact unimpressive thrust that took that goblin's life in the forest. The instant the thrust lands, I am already retracting into guard. Then I step hard forward and slam the iron-plated shield into the dummy with everything the charge carries. Retreat fast, reset, and repeat the whole sequence. Thrust, shield bash, retract, guard. Every thrust and every bash goes out at full effort. That kind of burst work drains stamina at a frightening rate, and an ordinary man would be gasping inside a few minutes. My abnormal constitution takes over instead, and whatever I spend comes back inside a few breaths. Castro swordsmanship was built for close work in narrow ground, dungeon corridors and tunnels, which is why there is almost no wide swinging in it. Partly because a hack costs several times the stamina of a thrust, and partly because in a tight space a swinging longsword catches the wall or gets fouled on a body. This short vicious thrust punches through leather armor in an instant using the smallest possible arc. The whole session runs on that one repeating motion. Boring high-pressure work like this puts a tremendous load on a person's mind, and the usual pattern is that a newcomer loses focus and starts deforming his movements after roughly half an hour. I go through it like a tireless alchemical puppet, holding concentration the whole way. That is the same physique again, because Fergomir's Surge does not only refill stamina, it resists abnormal statuses in general, and mental fatigue and pressure sit squarely inside that category. Somewhere near the 2-hour mark, soaked through, something clicks behind my eyes. At the instant of the thrust, I fine-tune the angle my wrist delivers force through, without consciously deciding to. This time the training sword, blunted as it has become, goes into the hard wooden dummy like it is cutting butter and sinks deep with a soft wet sound. It buries 3 full inches into the wood, and hauling it back out takes real effort. The familiar translucent box arrives almost simultaneously. Castro's swordsmanship proficiency +1, level 3 to level 4. Constitution +1, strength +1. Watching the attribute points climb, delight goes straight through me. As I suspected, raising the swordsmanship level pulls the related basic attributes up with it. Castro's swordsmanship looks like nimble thrusting on the surface, and its core force generation still runs on instantaneous explosive power. Tens of thousands of repetitions of that produce their most obvious effect on strength and constitution. What I did not expect is that the box does not close. A new line of small text unrolls beneath it. Through tens of thousands of repetitions, it tells me, I have completely mastered a particular trick. It is the trick of twisting my entire body's strength into a single strand and condensing it onto one point at the sword's tip. I have acquired the feat Trench Rat's Bite. The entry follows. Trench Rat's Bite, feat level ordinary, prerequisite Castro swordsmanship at level 4 and mastery. Effect, all my swordsmanship thrusts gain an additional 5% physical penetration. I stare at it, genuinely surprised. I had no idea that pushing a skill to mastery would condense an additional feat out of it, which tells me something important, that a large portion of what makes a professional strong in this world is actually built out of the skills they ground down by hand. Between two professionals at the same level, differences in how many skills they trained, how far, and which feats those derived would put their real combat effectiveness worlds apart. And if grinding skills grants feats, then my talent should let me grind out a whole batch of practical ones and reinforce myself from every direction. My eyes go to Levin Archery on the panel. Push that to mastery as well. See whether a new feat drops out, and the theory is confirmed. My mood improves considerably because that is another safe, stable channel for getting stronger. 5% penetration though. I rub my chin and decide to test what that crude-sounding bonus actually changes. I breathe in, raise the training sword, and thrust into the ruined dummy again, this time not chasing raw power but paying attention to what the tip reports back on contact. The feel is entirely different. I had assumed 5% would be negligible, and I was wrong. The blunt sword goes into the dummy just as smoothly as before. Then I understand it. I pull the sword out and straighten up. The real value of that 5% has nothing to do with damage numbers. It is stability. The single biggest weakness of thrusting as a method is what happens when the point meets something hard. It very easily slides off or binds up depending on angle, on force, on the curvature of the armor. That is precisely why Castro's swordsmanship preaches conserving stamina and guaranteeing penetration through repeated rapid thrusts. With the feet amplifying it, even a 5% correction is enough for the tip to bite into the surface the moment it touches. Effective armor breaking that used to need 2 or 3 attempts now takes 1. In terms of reliability, this unremarkable little feat changes the efficiency of stabbing swordsmanship in kind rather than degree. I keep training until my stomach starts complaining, then stop and rack the sword and shield. Looking down, the training sword's tip has visibly flattened, and the ironclad dummy is punched full of holes with wood chips scattered across the floor. Those 10 copper coins were spent extremely well. If I trained on my own equipment, the daily maintenance and wear alone would run close to 50 copper. Praise Nia, once again. I give her a mental thumbs up from the middle of an empty training room, because without her recommendation I would never have gotten onto a guild benefit that amounts to a free ride. I'd pack up the protective gear and walk out in a decent mood. Watching yourself get measurably stronger every single day is a genuinely intoxicating feeling. Next comes filling my stomach at Amber's Tavern next door, and after that going home to check those jars of coagulation moss drying in the shade. If the improved hemostatic ointment performs the way I expect, I have secured a second stable financial channel in this world. Outside the guild gates, the sky has gone fully dark. Foot traffic on the street has thinned out and only a few shops serving the adventurer trade are still lit, pushing enticing food smells into a chilly night. The wild boar and Rose sits a few steps from the guild. The heavy wooden door is ajar, and noise and the char smell of grilled meat get out through the gap before I reach it. That tavern is a genuine golden signboard in Greystone Town. Amber's father was once a renowned professional rank adventurer here, and the team he rode with reportedly carried real weight even up in White River City. After he retired for reasons nobody discusses, the man opened this place, working the back kitchen as head chef and brewing with a skill that keeps the local drunks flocking in. If that uncle had wanted to convert into a full-time beverage merchant, Amber would count as a wealthy heiress today. With a bodhisattva like that anchoring the room, ordinary people do not dare start anything here. I push the door and go in. The first thing that arrives is warm yellow light, orange flames crackling in the fireplace, and old-fashioned lanterns along the walls giving off a soft glow. The sound is wooden beer mugs colliding hard and the bright tune a bard is picking out on a lute in the corner. The tavern runs across 2 floors, with the dining area in the middle of the ground floor taking up 2/3 of the space. A dozen huge oak tables are crowded with every variety of adventurer. Waitresses in corsets thread through the press like colorful butterflies, dodging the greasy hands of drunks with practiced ease. I cut across the busy center and head straight for the bar. I spot her from a distance because Amber is hard to miss. Her signature golden red hair is tied high into a neat ponytail that bounces with every movement under the lamps. She has on a tight white low-cut shirt with a black corset vest over it, and a dark skirt cut for moving fast. The curve of her chest becomes frankly oppressive whenever she bends to pour. Right now she is carrying 3 enormous draft mugs in one hand, the muscle in her forearm standing out slightly. She works the brass tap on the barrel, and white foam pours over the rims. Then she slams the finished drinks down in front of a customer with the flourish of a warrior planting a flag. I am about to walk over when my step falters, because there is somebody at the bar I would rather not see. A middle-aged man with a gloomy stare complaining loudly enough to spray spittle across the counter. Copper Counter Harkin. That nickname is practically notorious among the low-level adventurers of Greystone Town. The story is that he once came to blows with his own teammates over a few coppers worth of materials. During a loot split, later he apparently spotted the man he had argued with in a tavern and started the fight all over again, and the patrol officers ended up detaining both of them. He holds grudges, he counts every coin, and he goes looking for trouble. His combat ability is genuinely decent, and among today's non-professional adventurers he sits close to the first tier. That personality means no team worth joining will have him. I frown slightly, take a wide arc around his section of the bar, and settle into the far corner seat. Passing behind him, his drunken complaints get into my ears anyway. He is slapping the table and cursing about some woman called Nightingale who apparently got hooked away by a pretty boy from the neighboring town. Then he moves on to the guild's damned old man, and what madness possessed him to recruit all these outsiders. It has stripped away his income entirely, he says, and handed it to a swarm of locusts. The adventurers around him are equally deep in their cups and listening with real enthusiasm, raising their mugs to agree at intervals, the whole group united by a shared enemy. Adventurers are like that. 2 strangers with one target to complain about will be sworn brothers inside 10 minutes. The moment I sit down, Amber looks up from wiping the counter and lights up, calling out a greeting. Then her expression shifts into something resentful, the look of a neglected wife, and she demands to know what has kept me so busy that I cannot even come play cards. The gambling goddess. Her hands have clearly been itching for weeks. I explain, smiling, that I have been training, tell her not to be angry, and ask for the usual, food first. She tells me to wait for it, spins around and bolts into the back kitchen. She comes back out shortly with a huge tray and puts a generous portion of roasted beef brisket down in front of me.